Arpedia Online is known as the best virtual game of our time. It uses a specially designed capsule to deceive the five senses and make what is happening indistinguishable from the real course of events. Patented scanning technology allows you to create an avatar that will match the user as closely as possible. All this is combined with the latest artificial intelligence that makes monsters behave as if they have real feelings. The game offers its users a fun and relaxing experience without unnecessary stress. That is why it has rapidly gained popularity all over the world. Like every popular game, Arpedia has communities that watch the top players. The game forum is not only for players, but also for fans. But one player was being watched especially closely by fans. It was a rank 50 warrior named Bartz. There was a reason why he was watched more than the top rank players. Usually, players form groups in Arpedia Online, and it is dictated by common sense. And he was a hardcore solo player who defeated a dragon single-handedly. There were many different rumors, gossip, and outright speculations surrounding the person of this player. Some believed that he was directly connected to the developers of the game. Others, that he was someone's rich son who donated a fortune to the game. In fact, both were wrong. The player's real identity is the unemployed Kang Han. Actually, Kang Han was surprised that he became the most popular player just by defeating a small dragon, and that there was probably quite a bit of panic on the forums while he was visiting his grandmother. Returning to the game from vacation, he saw himself standing naked in the middle of a crowded square of a virtual city. People were outraged by his nakedness and promised to ban him. Many people just burst out laughing at this dunce. Clearly a newbie who got into a virtual game for the first time. Some people thought that one of the player's balls had gone beyond the videos and that they had gone crazy and that it was unclear where the moderators were. He sheepishly justified himself by saying that he would now find clothes and would look normal and asked not to report him. He logged into his player status and was surprised to find that his inventory was empty. His items disappeared into thin air. He wanted to report a bug. The screen showed that he was Bartz, a first-level rookie. Kang Han screamed in horror and indignation. Everything he had earned through hard work over the years of playing had disappeared somewhere. His mother, worried by his scream, flew into the room. She asked anxiously what had happened to him. He turned to his mother, his face sweaty and looking extremely confused. It seemed like he was about to faint from shock. The mother looked at him and thought that her son had gone completely crazy from games, and it was time to treat him for his gaming addiction. He explained to his mother through tears that his game account had been hacked. Mom was so indignant that she turned into a furious tiger. She scolded him for making a fuss over stupid things. She screamed that when he dropped out of college, he promised to sort out his life. But instead, he sits at home all day and only sleeps during breaks from his games. Saying that he would soon give her a heart attack, the mother left, loudly slamming the door. And he was sobbing like a baby and begging someone virtual to return the buff. Khan, in desperation, called the game developer and reported that his account had been hacked and all his achievements had been stolen. His written request was answered that everything was fine. On the other end, they asked for his name and phone number and said they were conducting verification. Then they said that Mr. Khan's character was created only 4 days ago and there was nothing suspicious about him. It turns out that his Bartz was created during open beta testing and now the level has reset and all achievements and items are gone. Logged in once. This meant that he couldn't delete his character and his account had definitely been hacked. But the developers assured that their security system is at the best world level and hacking is impossible. And that, most likely, the problem could have arisen due to his fault. He cried into the phone that he couldn't hurt himself and destroy his many years of achievements. They told him they were very sorry and recommended changing his password every week. Never changed his password, and the company is not responsible for problems caused by personal leaks of users' personal information. Khan had been playing games for a number of years and clearly understood that since he himself had not deleted the profile, then the problem was hackers. He swore that he would never forgive whoever did this. He promised to find and avenge himself and his legendary character. Kang Han's brother came into his room and said that his mother asked him to give him something. His brother saw him with a bottle in his hand and asked in surprise what had happened to him. He was worried that his brother wanted to drink, and he himself was still underage. The brother thought he had gone completely crazy while he was preparing for the exam at the civil service school. On the table stood a portrait of Bart's with mourning ribbons, and Kang Han explained that he had lost his other half. At such a moment, it was impossible to think about anything else. The brother thought that it was his own fault, and that he played all day long like a pathetic loser. The brother told our hero that his mother had asked him to bring a ladle from downstairs. Khan was indignant and told his brother to go himself and not interfere with his grief. The brother replied that he was in a hurry to go to extra classes because he was a schoolboy and the eldest was unemployed and living off his mother. Han thought that Yu Hyun had no respect for his older brother and that he looks down on him. Even his own brother didn't respect him. He went down to his father, who was standing behind the counter of their shop, and said that his mother had sent him to bring a ladle. His father was surprised by this request. Khan replied that he didn't know for sure, but it seemed that her old one had broken while she was cooking rice. Father was still surprised at what one had to do with a ladle to break it. Khan said importantly that all objects have a margin of safety. But where this phrase came from in Khan's head was unclear. The words about the safety margin gave him an idea. He cried out with joy and rushed away. He had a plan. The father also thought that something was going on with his son's head lately. Father shouted after him for Khan to close the doors behind him. Arpedia Online has an item durability system. Each player spends it during the game. When the durability reaches the limit, the item breaks. Therefore, players are forced to look for blacksmiths who can repair these items. And in this case, everything depends on the level. The more expensive and better the equipment, the more experienced the blacksmith must be. Khan thought about what might happen if a great blacksmith appeared who would repair things for next to nothing. Everyone would bring their items to him. Bart's was equipped with top-notch gear, and the hacker couldn't just take it and throw it away. If he sold it before deleting the character, then Khan will be able to track him down by the trail of these sales. He swore to find that scoundrel at all costs, and for this purpose he returned to the Arpedia Online game. The gate guard greeted him and asked if Khan wanted to enter the game. Khan replied that he wanted to create a new character. He was asked to choose a character's birthday. Our hero said, "Let it be random." The guard said that it would be April 4th and asked if he would give his name or also pick a random one. Our hero replied that he would come up with one himself. He thought about giving it an interesting name. He wanted the name to be short and strong, like Bart's. And he decided that the new hero would be called Zeke. So the character was created. He swore that Zeke would become the name of the best blacksmith in Arpedia. But his inner voice said that there was no chance. Because being a blacksmith is a job that requires great patience, endurance, talent, and endless experience. And it is not something that any idiot can challenge. Pabuchi, a blacksmith, appeared in the game. He ordered him to get out with his claims. He ordered this impudent boy, who wanted to become the best blacksmith, to get out immediately. The new character Zeke was very confused. In Arpedia, you can either buy a skill book or learn on the job. The second way allows you to earn money and gain experience in the profession, but everyone avoids it. The reason is that artisans have very strange characters. Khan, when he was still playing Bartsum, always tried to avoid this Pabuchi when he brought equipment to be repaired. But now the new character had no money and would have to learn from experience. He didn't think that the quests to change professions would be impossible to complete. His character knocked on the door. He came to the workshop and declared that he wanted to become a blacksmith. Master Pabuchi looked at the boy carefully. The boy said that he doesn't just want to become a blacksmith, but the best in the world. Pabuchi replied that he had no chance of that. The boy was surprised by such an answer. Pabuchi laughed and said that just by looking at him, it was clear that he would never cope. But the stubborn boy didn't give up and asked him to at least check. Pabuchi decided to give him a chance. Zeke asked to order him to do something. Pabuchi led him to a huge woodshed and ordered him to chop some wood first. And he gave him 1 day to do everything. And if he could handle such a simple task, then Pabuchi promised to make a decision. Zeke asked if all the logs needed to be chopped down. Pabuchi laughed that no one was forcing him, and the guy could refuse. And our hero had no choice but to get down to business. He chopped and cursed that other students were immediately taught without trial tests. One of the students said that it was a matter of kinship, which he most likely did not have. He suggested that when the character was created, they asked him his date of birth. And it seems that the date of birth affects the kinship with different professions. And so the start of leveling can be very difficult. This blacksmith's apprentice is also stuck here for the same reason. Khan cursed that he didn't know about this before, and that now he would have to create a new character. But in that case, he would have to gain level 10 again. So it was better not to whine, but to focus on the task. The comrade wished him luck and left, and our hero began to chop wood, hoping that the master would take on his training. He chopped and chopped wood like a madman. Finally, he chopped down the entire wood pile and fell to the ground, exhausted. Master Pabuchi was pleasantly surprised. He said that he had completed the task in 1 day and now hoped that the master would take him on as an apprentice. But the mischievous Pabuchi refused. Instead, he sent him to the Rankle mine to get 10 pieces of black coal. Zik was hurt to the point of tears. He never expected such an attitude. The recommended levels to be in Rankle mine were 15 to 45. The field boss for this mine was a level 45 Furious Boar. Zeke objected to Pabuchi that he was knowingly sending him to certain death because he was only level 10. But Pabuchi said that the guy was just a pathetic crybaby and gave him a sword. And in general, if Zeke doesn't like something, he can go wherever he wants. And Zeke thought, is his birth date really that bad? But there was nothing to be done. He made Pabuchi promise that if he returned, he would take him as a student. Zeke went to the mine. In the mine, our hero began to chop black coal. It was hard for him. He ordered himself to calm down and remember how he chopped wood. After all, this is not a game where brute physical force rules. Attitude and ingenuity win. He remembered the movements he made when he was chopping wood. He had to gently grasp the hilt of the sword and give it momentum. He did so and easily obtained the required number of pieces of coal. Zeke thought that 2 years of playing had not been wasted after all. He continued and imagined himself swinging a sword. Finally, the task was completely completed. Now it was necessary to somehow deliver the coal to Pabuchi and begin training. He thought that the quest to change his profession was finally completed. He mentally threatened the damn hacker. Suddenly, he heard a terrible roar. It was the field boss of the Rankle mine, a furious boar, and Zeke quickly ran away from there. The chances of escaping from the fast beast were, of course, slim. This furious boar appeared in a random place once a day. And, as luck would have it, our hero found himself in just such a place. Zeke was counting on leveling up his craft profession, but he didn't have enough health points to survive even 1 hit. He was counting on the fact that maybe the boar had become aggravated not only at him, and that then there would be a chance to escape. In Arpedia, artisans aren't designed to fight monsters, but playing in virtual reality means the character is connected to their real body. The main focus of the game is on realism, and if you have combat experience or a sixth sense, you can win even under unequal conditions. From his previous character, Han knew that the Furious Boar's weak point was right in his forehead. No matter how weak the damage, he could win if he hit it there. And with these hopes, his character Zeke entered into battle with a furious boar. The boar blocked his attack. Our hero's movements were too slow for such a fight. He thought he would have stocked up on potions of agility if he had known about such an adventure in advance. The boar, its eyes blazing furiously, rushed straight towards him. Zeke didn't know what to do in such a difficult situation. The level was low for such a battle. He couldn't escape anyway, so he had to attack the boar's weak point. He remembered that he was a legendary player named Bartz, and there was no need to worry about some bore. And even though the character is no longer there, you can't drink away the experience. The game notified him that he didn't have enough stamina and asked him to do something. And suddenly, the arrow hit the boar's head. Our hero was very surprised that someone was still hunting here. The tip of one of the boar's horns was broken off. Zeke turned around and saw a girl with a bow. She said she was disappointed because she had expected to do more damage to the boar. The boar roared and now rushed at the girl. She didn't understand why he was targeting her. Zeke shouted for her to shoot straight at the forehead and that was the boar's weak spot. She fired a powerful shot and dealt 720 points of damage to the boar. The game reported that the archer had defeated the furious boar. The archer's name was Sia. Zeke sat next to the defeated boar and couldn't believe his luck. He was still alive, which meant the mission was continuing. He told the girl that he barely survived, and that was only thanks to her. She placed her hands on his shoulders. Sia looked at the young man carefully and asked if they had met before. His face was definitely familiar to her. He remained silent, and she repeated her question again. Sia said that maybe she was mistaken. Anything can happen. Zeke stood there like an idiot, not understanding why this girl was coming so close. He didn't want to reveal his plans, so he ran away, thanking her for her help as he ran. But the archer's gaze was sharp, and she was sure that they had seen each other somewhere before. And his gait was very familiar. He brought a bag with 10 pieces of coal to the master. Zeke looked closely at the coal and realized that he had never encountered such a mineral before. Pabuchi was very surprised that the boy not only returned, but also brought coal. And Zeke reproached him for knowing how difficult it was, but still sending him to the mine. And the master had to admit that he was wrong about him and that he was hiring Zeke as his apprentice. With such endurance, it was possible to work and even teach something. Zeke was very happy. A ball with wings flew up to him and asked if our hero wanted to become a blacksmith. Zeke replied that he had already done so much for this. The game congratulated the hero on the fact that he was now officially a blacksmith. The player was very happy that everything was going according to his plan. Thus began the life of the blacksmith Zeke, which one day will become a legend. Pabuchi ordered him not to hang around and to follow him, and in general, to obey him without question. And they went to the forge. In the forge, he forged his first simple sickle, and thought that it turned out well, and that he might have a talent for blacksmithing. The master watched as Zeke rejoiced, like a child with his first product. But about the sickle, he chuckled that it was complete junk, and it was impossible to even cut a sheet with it. He sternly said not to bring such junk anymore, and he would not pay for it. Zeke started to make excuses that this was his first job, but Pabuchi cut him off and ordered him to make 30 short swords, and if he brought even one ugly one, he would be fired. Our hero thought that Pabuchi was a stupid, bald curmudgeon, and, to top it all off, a tyrant. He promised himself that he would make better short swords. The first sword did not satisfy him, and he asked himself what he did wrong, why it was unsuccessful. But how was he supposed to know how good swords were made? The game popped up a notification that it was a cheap, low-quality short sword, hard to use because of its terrible condition. He thought that as long as he was doing this kind of shit, he wouldn't be able to convince that bald guy. He took another one and looked closely at the sword. Some blue lines were visible all over the blade. There were such blue lines on other swords, too. But nevertheless, they were different from each other. He approached the other apprentice with his sword. The lines of the sword were very crooked. He started waving his sword in front of the dumbfounded guy's face. He didn't even know why. Zeke asked if he could see blue lines on the blade. He said no, and asked him not to wave the weapon in front of his face. Zeke decided to deal with this later, but for now he would pump up his blacksmith training, which consisted of repairing 5 axes and giving them to Pabuchi. He started repairing the axes, and this time he saw red lines on them. He hit the axe with a hammer, and it fell apart. The mission was a failure. Our hero thought that he had no talent for blacksmithing at all and was very upset. The damage to the axe matched the direction of the lines. He had a hunch. Meanwhile, Master Pabuchi returned to his workshop. He told Zeke that he had been fiddling around for several days and hadn't made the swords yet. He saw Zeke in the workshop and resolutely headed towards the apprentice to give him a magic kick in the ass. He sternly demanded that he tell him when the swords would be ready and the axes repaired. On the table he saw ready swords. Pabuchi took one in his hands and almost fell over in surprise. He did not understand how the student could make such swords. And the student modestly asked, "Aren't they perfect?" After several days of forging swords and repairing items, Zeke discovered a shocking truth. The blue lines are the marks of a hammer striking metal, and their shape depends on the force and distance between the strikes, and the quality depends on the gaps between the lines. Red lines are cracks in the metal structure that appear as a result of breakage or unsuccessful repair. If you use this understanding of the material and process correctly, you can create the perfect item. Roughly speaking, it is a cheat that helps you process equipment. Zeke didn't sleep for several nights, but it was worth it. He got an amazing ability. Pabuchi said that Zeke did a great job and that he had nothing more to teach him. Zeke was happy, but surprised. All the training happened so quickly. Pabuchi said that usually such untalented guys give up quickly, and he doesn't waste his time and experience on them. Zeke asked if there were people who had completed his tasks without talent. Pabuchi replied that they lacked patience. He also asked if there had been people before him who had seen lines on the metal, but Pabuchi had no idea what Zeke was asking him about. Zeke was deep in thought. There was a high chance that the ability to see lines was related to a hidden achievement, and the condition for obtaining it could be promotion to a blacksmith during training. It is possible that he was the only one who went through these difficulties, and this meant that only he had such an ability. He remembered the people who had pestered him in the game with the same question. They were annoyed that Bartz stubbornly wanted to play alone, without a team or group. The answer was simple. The player knew that he couldn't trust people. That's why he didn't play in a team with anyone. Standing behind the checkout counter of his parents' store, he decided that these annoying people were just a dream. He passed out then because he didn't get enough sleep. And anyway, Khan didn't understand why he had to sit at the cash register all the time if there was no one in the store. Suddenly his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Khan answered. The voice on the other end of the line said he was from the game's technical support. Khan told him to go. He calmly continued that Mr. Khan had contacted them about a hacker attack. Khan replied that they really decided to restore all of his character data? But the voice said that they couldn't do that, and that would violate company policy. But they offered Mr. Khan a small compensation for moral damages. Khan replied that no compensation was worth the loss of the legendary Bartz. The voice on the phone was offering him the latest model of a virtual reality capsule for $8,000. And was Mr. Khan interested in such an offer? Khan asked for more details about this. Did tech support discuss whether he liked this proposal? They said that he initially wanted to refuse, but then agreed when he heard about the new capsule. CEO Sunchok said he was glad to hear it. He was asked if he had been hasty in buying the capsule at his own expense, but he replied that he had not. This Khan's account was hacked, and the top character was deleted, but he still continues to play this game. And he even chose the blacksmith class, which everyone avoids. The director was curious about what this Khan would show in the next update of the game. He couldn't wait for it, because the player was very talented. Meanwhile, the game was recruiting participants for a group to go to Deborah's dungeon. An archer, a knight, and a mage had already been recruited. Sia asked to write to her in private messages. Sia was upset that it was so hard to find people. As soon as someone was found, he immediately refused. Sia already thought that 3 people would have to go. Suddenly, she saw the guy she helped with the boar. She asked him to stop. She said he was just in time, and would he like to join their group for a cave trip? He decided he had to go. She asked to talk to her for a little while. He ran, but Sia was fast and caught up with him. He stopped, and said that she was getting on his nerves with her conversations. Sia invited him to join their group. She promised that it would be very interesting, especially if he hadn't been there yet. It's a good place for beginners. Lots of experience and lots of money. But how can I tell her that his character Bartz was not only there, but that he was the one who opened this dungeon? She said that 4 were needed, but only 2 responded so far. He began to refuse. Sia sadly said that maybe it was fate since they kept bumping into each other. From her point of view, it was a great idea to go together. He decided that he would not agree for anything in the world. Meanwhile, the news of the excellent blacksmith Zeke spread throughout the districts. People asked each other if this new blacksmith really fixes everything so well. And not only does it repair well, it also charges very little. Just 30 gold. Zeke didn't think such a crowd would gather. He worked non-stop and decided that he needed to raise prices. But he stopped himself. Screw the money. The main thing is to get revenge on the hacker. The next customer handed him a bow. Zeke recognized it immediately. It was a ranger's bow, the only piece of D-rank equipment Bartz had. Zeke was glad to have found the hacker's trail, but the mark on the bow was missing. The 2 who brought the bow gave him 30 gold and demanded that he fix it as soon as possible. One asked the other if he was really going to return the bow to its owner. The other replied that he had to invest a little first to get the girl. Zeke thought this game wasn't a dating sim. They reasoned that they were going to help her in the dungeon and give her an expensive bow, so the girl simply had to meet them in real life, since they had done so much for her. They smiled obscenely, indulging in dreams of how they would first seduce her, then both have sex with her, and then tell everything on the forum to the entire community for their amusement. Zeke felt very sorry for the girl that these scumbags were targeting, and he thought about how to help her. One told the other to write to her so that she wouldn't forget about them and asked to remind her of the nickname. The second one started making fun of his friend, saying that he had a bad memory and that the girl's nickname was Sia. Zeke heard this. He handed the repaired bow to the bastards and thought about what to do next. He held a bow in his hands, and the man pulled it towards himself. Zeke claimed that they had brought stolen onions and that the owner's name was written on the poster. They decided that he simply wanted to squeeze more money out of them. The craftsmen had gone completely crazy. They told Zeke that the fucking blacksmith really wanted to fight. Well, they'll organize it for him right there and then. They demanded that he apologize to them and threatened to delete the game. Some big guy in the queue demanded that they move away because the repair was finished. Verzila demanded that they not delay the others. The big guy's name was Storm Guilford. He was the leader of the most famous mercenary group, the Red Tigers, and also a famous ranker who was ranked 45th in the north. And now he was standing in line at the blacksmith's. He said that this was his favorite sword, and that he had many pleasant memories associated with it. He heard rumors that the master could repair weapons in any condition, but Zeke examined the sword and shook his head, saying that there was little strength left and he could not handle it. Guilford sighed that he would have to look for Girion. Then he looked at the 2 scoundrels and asked what they were still doing here, since their bow had already been repaired. He told them to get out, as their repairs were already finished, and not to delay the others. They recognized Stormy Guilford and couldn't figure out what such a famous ranker was doing here. They said that they had chatted for a while and were just about to leave. They wished everyone a good day and were gone like the wind. Guilford laughed and told the blacksmith that they knew how to be both polite and quick when you scared them. Zeke looked at the broken sword with doubt, and Guilford said with warmth in his voice that it was his favorite sword, and he had it since the time when he was a newbie. Zeke said that he needed to look, and that he should wait a minute. Guilford looked at the guy and thought that even though he was repairing low-level equipment, the 99% result was amazing. He assumed that the master had a hidden skill, and Zeke couldn't get the conversation of those 2 about the girl out of his head and couldn't concentrate. Guilford thought that when the repairs were finished, he would need to drop by the guild. And then something terrible happened. The hammer struck the sword and it shattered into pieces, and the repair failed. The sword would never be usable again. Guilford was both angry and terrified. He kept muttering that the sword was broken. Zeke got scared and left the game, and Guilford demanded that the damn blacksmith return immediately. Meanwhile, the three stood at the entrance to Deborah's cave. Above the entrance was written that the discoverer was Bartz. It was Sia and those two thugs. They told her that this was the lair of the terrible witch Deborah, who 300 years ago plunged the kingdom of Barkus into chaos. And this was a room for beginners, where they had been more than once. They were about to enter the dungeon when someone called out to them. Zeke ran up to them. He barely made it in time. He asked if they were the team that had gathered in Deborah's dungeon. Sia was glad to see the ungrateful blacksmith again. He asked Sia what he had done to deserve such words. She replied that she had saved him, and instead of showing gratitude, he was running away from her. She asked if he really wanted to join them in clearing the dungeon. He confirmed. Sia gave her name and extended her hand. He said his name was Zeke and asked to take care of him in the cave. She promised. She obviously liked the guy. She turned to the two and said that she had finally managed to convince the blacksmith Zeke to be the fourth member of the group. She introduced them to Zeke. Two of them were named Alden and Xeris. She added that they were experienced players, around level 70. They didn't like the blacksmith's appearance. He wasn't part of their plans. They told Zeke that he shouldn't have bothered them because he had no fighting skills. But Sia said that although he has no experience, he is strong. They insisted that even if that were the case, his craft profession did not involve being a strong warrior. He asked if they were the ones who brought him onions to be repaired. They apologized and said that they had gotten a little carried away at the time. He said he would follow them like a dog. They finally decided to go in, as they had already spent a lot of time talking. They whispered to each other. Suddenly the blacksmith heard something and would blab to Sia about their intentions. Alden and Xeris decided that they would watch the blacksmith, and if something was wrong, they would simply kill him somewhere on the sly. Zeke realized that these two were not only vulgar, but also very dangerous. It was dark in the cave, and suddenly a rotating fire with a circular cut appeared. Alden caught Sia's admiring gaze, impressed by his abilities. He decided that she was already in love with him. She wanted to know what kind of technology this was. Zeke saw a crowd of dead people with swords and spears. From previous games, he knew where the skeleton's weak point was. It was the temple, and he began to deal with them. He understood that at the moment, he had no fighting skills and could not allow himself to be surrounded. Therefore, it was necessary to clean everything up as quickly as possible. The tree soldier's weak point was his heart. The system told him he didn't have enough stamina and advised him to eat something. He was surprised that his strength had run out so quickly. Zeke had some cookies with him just in case, and Sia told her companions if they had seen Zeke kill the dead with one blow, even without skills, and that he was definitely very strong. They thought he was a bastard. They wanted to finish off this craftsman right now. Zeke already understood that these two wanted to get rid of him. Our hero saw an approaching skeleton with a bow who was preparing to shoot in their direction. The first arrow hit Alden's axe. It ricocheted off the axe and hit Zeke. One of the arrows wounded Zeke in the chest. Alden was very pleased. It was his hidden skill. Plus, a ricocheted arrow doubles the damage. It seemed like he wasn't the one who shot the arrow, but he was the one who wounded. The game informed us that our hero had temporary paralysis. His movements would be slow for 10 minutes. Zeke tried to pretend that he wasn't in pain, but in reality, it was very painful. Alden and his comrade mocked Zeke, saying that he looked tired and that craftsmen had no business sticking their noses into combat missions. They said that they would not carry him and that he should rest here. Sia tried to argue with them that he couldn't be left here in such a state, but they flatly refused to take the wounded Zeke further into the cave with them. Zeke said he would stay alone and catch up with the group after a break, or return to the exit. The two told Sia that he was right, and that this was exactly what needed to be done, since they knew each other's position and that there was absolutely nothing to worry about. She finally agreed and asked Zeke to write when he was free of paralysis. He promised, and they went further into the cave. Meanwhile, our hero did not waste time. He called up the profile window and ordered a healing potion. Having received the potion, Zeke drank it to heal the wound faster and recover. He took a simple antidote, and the paralysis was lifted. In a short time, he was ready to act. 3 of the group moved deeper into the cave. They praised Sia's bow, saying that it was so light and matched well with her equipment. They did not forget to mention their own merits. They said that although the bow was cheap, it looked expensive, and that it probably wouldn't let them down in battle. They said they weren't archers, and it would be more useful to her. She said she'd lend it to him for the dungeon hunt. Alden and Xeris saw how happy Sia was, and decided it was time to carry out their dirty plans. Suddenly, a stone fell and knocked the glowing staff out of their hands. The staff fell to the ground and went out. Suddenly, the cave was illuminated by a bright light, and they saw a group of dead people in armor and helmets on their heads. The skeletons surrounded Alden and Xeris. Sia managed to run to the side. But she was noticed too. Someone grabbed her by the bow. She screamed to be let go. In the torchlight, she saw a familiar face. It was Zeke. He took her hand and said that they had to get out of here. She objected that they couldn't leave Alden and Xeris alone in a ring of monsters. He countered that they should be able to handle it easily, since they claimed to be over level 70, and the dungeon difficulty was around 45. They should be able to handle it easily, and then they would catch up. Meanwhile, Alden and Xeris fought off the skeletons, took their glowing staff, and looked around. They couldn't figure out what caused all the monsters to gather in one place. Xeris pointed out to Alden that there were many items of medium rarity in the dungeon. They sat down and began to examine the armor and swords and figure out how they could make money from this. The calculator started working in their heads. Killing monsters was clearly worth it. Suddenly, someone pulled them up to stop immediately. Someone from the darkness told them not to dare take everything for themselves. He told them that they were pieces of shit. They shouted that it was all theirs, but it was none other than Wang Chol-su, a level 100 character who was addressing them. Xeris and Alden were known on the forums for bullying girls in the game. Some of them were persuaded to meet them in real life. No one knew what happened at these meetings, but after these meetings, the girls left the game. The problem was that the others couldn't do anything because their victims were impossible to contact in the game. So Khan decided that he had to throw this garbage out of the game. At the present time, he was walking around the dungeon with a torch. He came up with a simple plan. After all, he was the discoverer of Deborah's dungeon and knew all the nuances by heart. Attacking the dungeon was a popular tactic of the past that everyone hated. He decided to lure them into a trap with something valuable. There was a lot of discussion on the forums about how Deborah's dungeon had many traps. He decided to make it look like they were the ones who attacked the group. The group was warned of the possible consequences of their behavior in the dungeon. They swore that they were victims themselves, but they had stolen jewelry with them. And then, according to the rules of the game organizers, such players leave the game forever. This is what happened with Alden and Xeris. Sia saw on the information board that they had logged out and left the game. She asked Zeke what had happened to them. He replied that they had urgent business. Sia said they should have told her they were leaving. Zeke said she could tell them her ugh when they were online again, even though he knew they were out for good. Sia said they would have to go back. She was currently level 42, and Zeke was level 38. He agreed that going deeper into the dungeon would be difficult for them. He thought that he had come here to save Sia from the scum. The goal had been achieved, and now he could return to the blacksmith's craft. Sia said she was sorry. She wanted to clear the dungeon because she wouldn't be able to play for a while. She sighed that nothing could be done. He was sad to learn that she was not planning to appear in the game anymore. He asked her to wait a minute. Zeke said that since it was her last time, why not try defeating the dungeon boss, Deborah? Sia didn't understand what drew him to feats at such a low level, and why he was even offering it to her. He said he understood how difficult her situation was, and wanted to give her some great memories of the game. He himself remembered the difficulties he had with his parents because of his gambling addiction. His mother would smash joysticks with a frying pan and say that all he could think about was games. And what if he turns on the computer again? He's dead. And all that? So now he was offering Sia to defeat the boss together. He asked her to just trust him. And then they will cope with this task. Sia said that if that was the case, then we needed to go faster. Because the doors were starting to close, Zeke ran after her. He barely made it before the gates closed. Sia doubted that 2 people were enough to defeat the boss. Zeke said that the boss is at the level of a stone golem, and they shouldn't have any problems with him. After all, he knew Deborah's dungeon like the back of his hand. With his previous character Bart's, he had cleared this dungeon hundreds of times. And even if he wanted to, he still couldn't make a mistake. He thought that this move would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He would help the girl and raise his level. Now the dungeon was unusually quiet. Zeke said that the boss will appear soon, and you need to wait. He usually appears in the form of a large stone boulder. Suddenly, they both clearly heard a snorting sound and saw a hamster. Sia laughed that if it was a monster, it was a very cute one. Zeke knew that this hamster usually sits on the golem. He scratched the hamster's chubby cheek. So the boss was already somewhere nearby, and he suggested the hamster to call his friend. Judging by the hum, the boss was already approaching. Paul started to move, and they decided to move away a little. The ground shook again, and a stone boss began to emerge from it like a mushroom after rain. Sia and Zeke waited for him to fully emerge. The boss was huge. He looked both scary and funny at the same time. The game announced that it was a giant stone golem of level 60, a huge automaton to guard the dungeon. Sia asked if he was sure they could handle it. He reassured her that if they followed the strategy, they would definitely succeed. She raised her bow and said she would cover Zeke. Her arrow hit the giant in the arm and caused 40 points of damage. The boss had a hamster on his head, and together they looked very picturesque. Zeke rushed at the stone idol with a sword. Compared to the giant, Zeke with his sword looked like an ant with a straw. But Zeke also took some damage and was very upset about it. The boss leaned over to get a better look, his huge mouth hanging open. The boss hit the place where he was standing with a stone fist. Zeke managed to jump to the side, but his jump was low now, and his other stats weren't that great. He knew that to defeat the golem he had to climb on its head, but our hero didn't know yet how to do this. He saw that the monster had an arrow sticking out of its hand, and that was great for Zeke. Sia called him, but he shouted at her to stay away for now and not come closer. He asked the girl to shoot at the golem's joints from afar. Sia promised to do so. She shot and dealt small but significant damage to the boss. The hamster barely managed to jump away from the arrows. Zeke had already planned out the route he would take to climb onto the giant's head, using the protruding arrows. So, it was time to start climbing. There were enough arrows. In one hand he held a sword, and in the other, a bottle of potion. These were the most necessary attributes now. The golem's most vulnerable spot was the core. The game developers stuck it right under the top of the head. He had to hit him right in the center of his skull, and he managed to do it. Zeke was terribly pleased with himself. He believed that he now deserved a reward. But Zeke rejoiced prematurely. The monster jerked his head, and our hero flew down, and the sword remained stuck in the giant's head. And suddenly, he found himself in Sia's hands. The girl was able to catch him in mid-air. Sia asked if he was okay. He replied that thanks to her, he was fine. But he didn't look so great, and she suggested that he rest and heal while she held off the giant. But Zeke told her that it was not necessary because they had already won. But the giant had no intention of dying. He suddenly flared up with furious strength and charged straight at them. This condition occurs when the golem's core is damaged. It can no longer be controlled. Attack power and speed are increased. This never happened in previous fights. Zeke realized that he had taken this dungeon too easy, and that the game had become more difficult. He had cleared it out hundreds of times before. He couldn't understand what had caused this change. It was the first time he had seen such a pattern. He realized that it was like that when he was Bart's. But now, he was Zeke, and the game had changed. Sia fired a powerful shot to help her battle buddy. The boss took quite serious damage. Sia grabbed Zeke's hand and pulled him along. She said that they were running low and needed to rest and heal. She begged him to run faster. The boss glared angrily and watched them run away. They hid behind a ridge of rocks. Sia said the gate was locked. She had already checked. They realized that the gate would remain locked until they dealt with the boss. Sia said that she tried to get into the core, but she failed. Zeke replied that they wouldn't be able to win because it was some kind of hidden pattern that would open up under very specific conditions. If their level was higher, the two of them could overwhelm him with damage or find an attack strategy. Sia said that then they would have to die with the least pain. He had almost given up and was saying that they wouldn't have time to figure out the new attack pattern. But she wasn't going to give up that easily. Sia said that since defeat is inevitable, one must fight to the end. He started talking about low levels again, and she replied that between the two of them, they were level 80 and jumped out from behind the stone. And she added that there is no need to look for meaning, but rather to work together and find a way out of the situation. She commanded him to run after her, and he replied that it would be better to wait. Suddenly, he remembered a picture from his real life. He was sleeping in his room, and his brother was leaning over him. The brother said that he knew that Khan had dropped out of school, and that how could they reach him if he didn't want to talk. The brother squatted down and said that Mom was crying because of Khan. He also asked to remember how Khan beat up the guys who bullied him. Khan was bigger then, and they couldn't do anything. But now, everything has changed. The brother said that now Khan is skinny, hunched over, and weak because he constantly plays games, and he has become a very poor student. Khan jumped up and asked his brother what he meant by this. The brother asked that Khan start paying attention to the people around him, and he added that no matter what happened, Khan could always share it with him or with friends. But the whole problem is that he lost all his close people. The brother added that he might not believe him, but there are many things in life that cannot be done alone. He called Han to eat the kimchi that his mother had prepared, and for his brother to hurry up because his family was waiting for him. While he sat behind a rock and indulged in memories, Sia fought alone. Her arrow made a breakthrough in the wind and was able to cause serious damage to the boss. The system said that she needed to rest because she didn't have enough stamina. She needed to eat and sleep. She realized that this was her limit. She was very sorry, but she did what she could. Suddenly, someone put a hand on her shoulder. She turned around and saw Zeke. He thanked her for giving him time to regain his strength and stamina. He said that now he too is ready to fight. Let it be all or nothing! He picked up a miner's pick and began to hammer it into the boss's body like a miner in a coal face. Pieces started flying off the boss. Zeke was very surprised that the pickaxe worked. In the game system, the pickaxe didn't have attack power as far as Zeke remembered. He tried to repeat it, but the pickaxe no longer gave the same result, and Zeke could not understand what was wrong with this system. There were messages about a miss, but he didn't know what the condition was for using a pickaxe against a stone boss. He was already expecting the stone giant to hit him with his fist when he heard a familiar voice in his head. It was the voice of Master Pabuchi. Pabuchi told him that ore is a combination of different materials. Although it becomes a single whole under high pressure, there are still gaps between the different materials inside it. But Zeke can't see them on his level. If you get right into these gaps, you can get something incredible. And Zeke began to do as Pabuchi had suggested. He no longer swung the pick randomly, but tried to find cracks and hit there. Now he understood the boss's new weak spot. He hit the cracks with a pickaxe and extracted 10 pieces of marble. His mining skill was increased by 30. Sia watched and whispered that this was incredible. Zeke was able to destroy the boss with just a crafting skill. Legs were crushed, and he was reduced to a meaningless pile of stones. The system announced that Zeke and Sia had worked together to defeat the giant golem. Zeke realized that the ability to see lines is also suitable for mining ore. But before, he couldn't see these lines. Sia happily shook Zeke by the shoulders and shouted that he had managed the incredible to defeat the stone boss with a production skill. Zeke said that it was a craft secret, and she simply wouldn't understand it because she wasn't a blacksmith. And if that was the case, then why would she need to know it at all? Suddenly, they were transported and found themselves sitting back to back inside some kind of manufacturing facility. Neither of them had ever seen this place before. They knew that after defeating the boss, there was a reward room. But this didn't look much like that room. Zeke said it felt like they were making mobs here. Our hero remembered that the reward room of Deborah's dungeon looked different. But he had heard rumors that there was also Deborah's laboratory. They were thrown there because of the victory over the rampaging golem. It was the first time he had seen such devices. They began to look around the laboratory, and Sia noticed a chest. The chest was cleverly hidden behind the conveyor belt. Zeke was delighted, so it was the awards room after all. There were strange objects in the chest. Sia pulled out some glasses. The system announced that these were eagle eyes, an artifact created by the witch of this world. Accuracy increases by 20%, range by 30%, skill by 13%. They started arguing about who would get this cool and rare item. They practically came to blows. He had to give in to the girl. He wanted to see what was in the second chest. There were 2 of them, so there should be rewards for both. This has always been the case in online games in Arpedia. Each winner received a prize. Finally, he found his chest with the prize under the conveyor. With great impatience, he opened the chest, but inside he was in for a great disappointment. There were gloves inside. These were the witch's gloves. They gave +3 to defense and magic power. It was better than nothing, but our hero was still upset. The next item in the chest was no less strange. It was a drawing of the guardian half. After completing the drawing, he will be able to create the black iron that the witch Deborah tried to develop. It was a drawing of a real robot, and he couldn't wait to start creating it. The conditions for creating the robot were smelting 5, assembly rank 3, summon rank 7. At the moment, with its levels, it was a useless piece of paper. The last item in the chest was a skill book. It was the hero's guide of Carvin. Carvin defeated Deborah. If the blacksmith reads it, he will gain the skills of understanding the structure and destruction of weapons. Conditions for the structure: comprehension skill, completed the Rankle dungeon quest, production skill rank 6 or higher. It turned out that Zeke could already use the skill of understanding the structure. All ores are made of a combination of different materials, so there are always gaps between them. This knowledge helped Zeke destroy the stone golem. He also developed the ability to see the boundaries of all materials. And he developed a skill that allowed him to take this ability to a new level. The more our hero developed the skill of understanding the structure, the easier it was to mine ores and break equipment. So he learned the skill of weapon destruction. But the battle with the witch was not over yet. She would definitely return and bring a powerful army with her. That was why Zeke did not destroy her cave. He hoped that the players who came after him would figure out how to fight the witch's golems and give battle to her army. It turns out that Carvin's skill can only be learned by a blacksmith. Sia came up and asked what kind of award he got. He said it was normal, it would do, and she shouldn't worry about taking away his glasses. But Zeke hid from the girl that he had received a hidden skill so as not to upset her. Sia said that she didn't find any more chests in the lab and that they could leave. They were in the cave for so long that it seemed like they hadn't seen the sky for ages. In real life, it took a long time too, a full 8 hours. She got scared and said that she needed to leave immediately. Sia suggested that Zeke be friends in real life too. They were about the same age. Zeke was embarrassed and blushed. He had no experience with girls outside the game. In the end, they shook hands and thanked each other for the interesting game. Sia said that she added him on Messenger and would write to him after her exams. They decided that they would definitely see each other again. Sia said that she had midterms starting and she wanted to clear the dungeon before them. She said that she would be back in 2 weeks and that they had a lot of fun. Now he understood why it was so important for her to clear Deborah's dungeon. They said goodbye, and Sia asked him not to be sad. because they still have many interesting quests ahead. 2 weeks would fly by. She thought that if someone were watching them from the outside, they would think they were saying goodbye forever. The game system announced that Zeke had died. Sia had killed the player and become a murderer. She thought it couldn't be that he was dead. He asked to take his items for himself. Her game name was now Red, like a killer. She didn't know what to do now. He wrote to her to just calm down. He woke up in real life in his house. Everything was there as before. A week has passed since the hunt for the stone golem. All this time, he was pumping up the skill of understanding the structure. Thanks to this, item creation and repair skills now have a 100% chance of success. And the quality of the equipment was impressive. In just 1 week, he became a renowned Bolden master. People flocked to him in crowds asking him to fix things. Sometimes he had to refuse because he was busy. But they were very persistent and tenacious. Suddenly, someone spread a rumor that the Slime King had appeared on the Urk Plain. The players immediately decided to go there, and Zeke too. And all because the Slime King was a super rare mob. And everyone ran there. But something puzzled our hero, so he stopped. He believed that the Slime King could not have appeared on the Urk Plain. It turns out that the Slime King didn't just show up. He came there specifically because of Zeke, because he wanted to hire him. Khan was reinstated at the Academy of Civil Servants at the request of his mother. After all, real life has not been cancelled. He studied the textbooks at the academy again. Other students paid attention to him because he could write quickly and was generally unusual. Exactly 1 month has passed since his account was hacked. Gained some notoriety on Arpedia with his new Blacksmith Zeke account, but was no closer to catching the hacker. Khan was looking for a way to quickly level up in the game. To do this, he chose the difficult quest, the Nosarka trade route. If the quest is successfully completed and the trade route stabilizes, big changes will come to Arpedia, which will lead to an update of the game. And Khan couldn't miss such fun. A quest from King Barkus was recently announced, in which you will have to travel with a caravan along a new trade route to the land of the gnomes, Nosark. The quest was given by the king himself. So many expected the amount of experience and rewards to be high. Nosark is the land of the race of blacksmiths and gnomes, and Zeke could not miss such an opportunity, also for professional reasons. But there was a problem. His level and reputation were not yet high enough. If he submits an application in such a situation, he will definitely fail. Khan was so upset about this that he started grabbing his hair, and the students nearby decided that he was very strange. And now his chance had come. Zeke had a visitor. He said he wanted to introduce himself first. His name was Dylan. He was the head of the Bolden branch of the Gold Rush Trade Association, and he had come to invite into their guild a man known as the Bolden King of Fixings. He said he was sure that their decent conditions would interest the master. Zeke listened with half an ear and thought at that time that maybe it would be worth submitting an application. Dylan noticed that the master was deep in thought and not listening to his proposal. He asked again if Zeke understood the essence of his proposal. The visitor smiled and said he was ready to do it all again. But Zeke stopped him by saying that he wasn't interested in the affairs of their guild. Dylan laughed and realized that Mr. Zeke knew nothing about the gold rush. Zeke picked his nose and lazily said that he knew about their trade guild, which was always in second place. But Dylan was no pushover, and, without the slightest embarrassment, noted that second place was still a very high position, and that they were planning to rise to first place soon. He offered Zeke to help their guild rise to first place in Arpedia, and that they were offering Zeke a special bonus. Zeke declined. Dylan said he expected that answer, and asked to be allowed to explain the steps to joining. Zeke stopped him. He knew how they would treat a common blacksmith and not allow him to participate in a group hunt. Zeke said that the trade guilds make you work hard for them and pay for items at the cost of the materials. Dylan countered that yes, such guilds do exist, but they are different. The guild representative offered Zeke to consider the partner's position, which managed to interest the master. Although usually such offers are only made to very high-level players. Dylan said that he didn't have to do anything special, and that he could sign up on their homepage to join, and that he would be his personal manager. The Gold Rush Trade Association was an alliance of 3 large guilds that had great influence in Arpedia and invited people of other professions. Dylan said that they would have no obligations to each other, and that they could pay with money or information for the creation and repair of equipment, and that this is for the beginning of cooperation. And if Mr. Zeke likes it, then he can always become a full member of the Gold Rush Guild. Zeke asked for time to consider the offer. After all, he would be able to refuse cooperation in 6 months. Zeke agreed, considering the collaboration profitable for himself. He told Dylan that he had a personal request. Dylan was fed up with this blacksmith, who also picked his nose all the time. Master Zeke clearly lacked good manners. He already thought that the partner's position was too much for a novice master, and he wasn't sure that his premonition that this Zeke would become famous was right. Dylan thought about this and much more as he rode in his rich carriage. But it was not only his premonition, but also many years of experience. He had already seen a low-level player who then surprised everyone with his crafting and repairing skills. It was Master Jirian. He was a great master, some of whose pieces were sold for millions. He had prepared a lot of money to recruit Zeke, but Zeke asked for something else. Zeke stood at the stand where the names of the people included in the first expedition were posted. Finally, he saw himself on the long list. Zeke was incredibly happy because this was his goal, and the goal was realized. There was little time to make a decision in the conversation with Dylan, but the guild did not disappoint. They also gave 10,000 money as a bonus. But Dylan, as an experienced trader, was afraid that Zeke would start throwing uncomfortable requests at him. Now that Zeke had decided on his participation in the expedition, he had to prepare for the quest. He went to the East Square to Joe's Bakery. Zeke didn't know that there was a very unpleasant meeting awaiting him with Mr. Guilford. Stormy Guilford, although he was the leader of the Red Tigers, did not like to bully and was now humbly standing in line for baked goods. People in line were very surprised by this. Such a famous person and such modesty. But when it was his turn and he approached the counter, he was disappointed to see that his favorite cookies were gone. This was the first time something like this had happened to him here. The seller said that the previous customer had taken all the cookies. The seller suggested that Guilford ask the customer to share the cookies with him. Guilford barked at the man with the large mountain of cookies to stop immediately and grabbed him by the shoulder. He said there were too many cookies, and where did such a kid get so much greed from? The boy turned around, and Guilford recognized the same blacksmith who had ruined his sword. Zeke was sweating from fear. He recognized Guilford, too. He was probably the last person he wanted to meet. But he decided to play the fool and asked Guilford to remind him if they had seen each other somewhere before. Guilford was filled with rage at the behavior of this bastard. He destroyed his favorite sword and now dared to mock him. But suddenly, the game notified that Guilford had logged out of his account. It was very unexpected, and for Zeke, it was a gift from fate. Guilford's subordinates looked around and could not understand where their commander had disappeared to. Meanwhile, in real life, a family scene, typical for experienced gamblers, was playing out. The wife was reproaching her husband for only making promises and doing nothing. He promised to wash the dishes, but he continued to play the whole time while his wife went to buy groceries. The woman was furious and just went and pulled the power cord from the computer. The husband screamed that he shouldn't do that and that the elbow shouldn't bend like that, and he asked to let him go immediately. The daughter listened to these parents' screams with great irritation because their screams were preventing her from preparing for her exams. In her room, on the wall, hung a bow and a holster with arrows. The girl shouted to her father to be quieter with her mother and not to disturb her while she studied. She thought that there was only 1 week left. Meanwhile, in Arpedia, at the gates of Barkas's castle, the expedition members gathered. The participants talked among themselves and looked around warily. There stood a group of mercenaries, the Red Tigers, led by their leader, Storm Guilford. But since Guilford and the mercenaries are part of the expedition, it means the quest will be safe. Guilford told his men to be very careful and find him. They promised that they would definitely find that impudent fellow. They assumed that since the guy had bought a lot of provisions, he was probably also taking part in the expedition. Zeke stood to the side, trying not to attract attention. Then he was noticed by a merchant who was offering essential items for the quest, and, of course, inexpensively. She asked Mr. Blacksmith to spare her just a minute. She asked if he had ever been suddenly attacked by monsters on the road. He answered evasively that anything could happen. She conspiratorially said that people in manufacturing professions should have at least one guarantee of survival, and that she could offer something. He agreed, but decided to get away from the annoying saleswoman as quickly as possible. She offered him to buy a magic ring with the ability to teleport for only 10,000. It was a very tempting offer, but it was a pity about the money. The amount was too big for him. In fact, it was all the money Dylan gave him. He decided to calmly consider whether such a ring could be useful to him or not, and he was already about to step aside. Suddenly, he noticed in shock that his hand began to move on its own, beyond his will. He didn't even have time to come to his senses before he gave the money to the merchant, and the ring was sparkling in his hand. The merchant was very happy and thanked him for the purchase. He thought that if anything happened, he would resell the ring. The system notified that he had purchased a ring with a teleportation function. The user would be transported 20 meters in 4 seconds, and after use, the ring would be destroyed. The saleswoman was pleased with herself. Today's sales were successful, and she made a solid profit. She was extremely greedy. She figured that Bolden was full of simpletons who didn't know anything, and that she would get easy money. Zeke approached her and said that she was a fraud. He demanded that this bastard return his money. She said she didn't understand what this beggar wanted from her. He ordered her to look him in the eye and not pretend she didn't know anything. He screamed that the swindler had sold him a piece of shit. The ring's functions were not worth the money. She denied it, saying she hadn't deceived anyone, and the ring really did have a teleportation function. Everything was fair, and that she wasn't a fraud, but an honest merchant, Lizzie. But Zeke was shouting that moving 20 meters in 4 seconds with the subsequent destruction of the ring couldn't be called teleportation. The guards were already running up to them, hearing the noise. The guard ordered to stop the market and be ready for the expedition to depart. Zeke turned to the soldier and pointed at Lizzie, and declared that she was a fraud. Lizzie hid behind the guard and looked at him slyly. She said that she was only engaged in honest business, and this man was accusing her without reason. And she put a bag of coins into the hand of the guard behind his back. The guard said he understood and pointed his spear at him. He said Zeke was a pathetic criminal who had slandered an innocent lady. He would be punished for that. Zeke tried to justify himself by saying that she sold him a bad product, but the security guard ordered him to shut his mouth. Zeke was stunned and outraged at the same time, and Lizzie giggled contentedly. The system reported that Lizzie was level 55. The beginning of the expedition did not go well for our hero. He had to go on an expedition in not the most pleasant surroundings. This tradeswoman, Lizzie. How he hated her. And on top of that, there was Guilford, whom everyone was afraid of. Under the tree stood a man in a cloak with a hood, on whose hand sat an eagle. The man attached a note to the eagle's paw. The man released the eagle from his hands and it soared upward. The eagle carried a message to Broden Castle. The note said that the event they were worried about had begun. It meant that the Barcus Kingdom had sent an expeditionary group. The person who read this message immediately burned the note. Half of the country's income came from intermediary trade, and for them, the departure of the expedition was very unpleasant news. They had to be stopped somehow. The man turned to the hooded warrior and said that they had to be stopped secretly because they had a good relationship with Barcus. The warrior said that he understood what the master meant. The warrior's name was Kira. He had the profession of assassin and rank 89 in the game. Meanwhile, Zeke stood in despair and did not understand that he could have allowed such a coincidence of circumstances. Lizzie called him her slave for life and ordered him to set up a tent for her for the night. He thought he couldn't hear the bitch's voice. The merchant said that she needed to log out for a while, but that in her absence Zeke would set up a shelter and cook dinner. She demanded that the slave confirm that he understood her words. Zeke got angry and shouted that she had gone too far, deciding that he was now her slave and had to fulfill her whims. He couldn't stand her anymore. Lizzie called the guard. The guard kicked him to the ground. He had to give in and submit. He had no right to fly out of the expedition. Zeke saw that this would be a suitable place for her tent. She said that there was no need to show off, and that now he was her slave for life, and that everything should be done by the time she returned. And with that, she temporarily left the game. He cried in despair. He could not allow himself to be expelled from the expedition, otherwise he would have strangled this scoundrel with his bare hands long ago. The expedition stopped for the night. Fires were burning near each tent, and dinner was being prepared. Zeke was sitting and eating with gusto when someone called out to him. The man turned to him and asked if he was the blacksmith who mended the best in Bolden, and threw his broken sword at his feet. He asked to repair his things. Zeke realized that these were mercenaries from the Red Tigers group. The man said with a grin that he didn't look very confident for a repair king, and he thought that he would find fault and eventually drag him to his boss. Zeke reluctantly agreed, because the stranger saw that Zeke was having dinner and nevertheless demanded to work immediately. Zeke began to study the structure of the sword with his keen eye. It was a twilight dagger with 90/90 durability. The man looked at his restored sword in admiration. It was in perfect condition. So the rumors about the master were not lying. It was strange, because it was he who destroyed Guilford's sword. Zeke was lying in a hammock with his book and asked the crowd to go away and not disturb his rest. He asked the old men to go away. When they heard the blacksmith call them old men, they literally flew into a rage. They were angry that the shameless blacksmith was behaving so brazenly after breaking their commander's sword. Zeke kept insisting that they were old men. They ordered him to follow them until he got a slap on the wrist. He remembered and slammed the book shut. The old man he saw at the bakery was pestering him for taking all the cookies. They said that the Red Tiger group couldn't be provoked by some cookies. Zeke replied with a laugh that, nevertheless, that was what had just happened, and, in general, he really wanted to let off steam on someone. They tied up the impudent fellow, wrapped him in rope so that he wouldn't escape, and dragged him to Guilford. He was already waiting impatiently. He told the brat that he was expecting an apology from him, and maybe even forgiving him if he was in the mood. Zeke told him to fuck off because he honestly stood in line and bought the cookies with his own money. So there was nothing to apologize for. Guilford told him not to be a fool, because he knew perfectly well that it wasn't about the cookies. Zeke said he didn't know what else he had to apologize for. Guilford said that he had done him a lot of harm, and he would not admit it. And he decided that the boy had asked for it himself, and now he would teach him a lesson. He called his guys over. Guilford ordered the mercenaries to untie Zeke. He was already glad to be released. But he saw Guilford rushing at him with a sword. But he was wrong. It was not a sword. Guilford's hands was an event item with an attack power of 1, the love stick. And he was not mistaken, it was exactly this kind of stick. Guilford approached him, saying that he would now beat good manners into his stupid head with this stick. The discipline lesson was about to begin. Guilford was swinging his stick angrily, and the blacksmith was dodging it. Zeke shouted at him to stop taking his anger out on him. Guilford threw Zeke to the ground and stood over him like an executioner over a victim. He said he hit very lightly, but even that hit was enough for him. Guilford felt a twinge of conscience. He wanted to teach the boy a lesson, of course, but he went a bit overboard, because the difference in levels was very big. He offered to change the terms, and if Zeke could touch him, he would let him go. Zeke lay there and thought that this stubborn old man had decided that he would never be beaten by the blacksmith. He was tired of everyone looking down on him and doing whatever they wanted, even enlisting him as a slave. He stood up with difficulty. His HP was 10/330. Zeke grabbed his sword and went furiously towards Guilford. They began to fight very fiercely. Guilford thought he was fighting well for a newbie. and the blacksmith clearly had fighting talent. But still, such people cannot overcome the difference in levels. But Zeke, who had already been fed up with everything for 2 days, didn't think about the difference in levels. He used his weapon destruction skill, which helps find holes in weapons or ore to destroy them. The prerequisite for using it is to level up to rank 7. And today Zeke just pumped this skill up to rank 7. The system informed him that he could now learn the weapon destruction skill. And he learned it. This is what helped our hero break Guilford's weapon during the battle. A ranker or not, those around him have never seen anything like this before. Zeke grabbed Guilford by the throat and headbutted him in the forehead. Guilford's eyes lit up with stars. He roared that he would kill that damn blacksmith. Zeke giggled that this was actually his first kiss. The team was barely holding back their mad commander, who had been pretty roughed up by the blacksmith Zeke. The lesson in good manners had clearly not gone according to plan, to the exhausted Zeke. He handed him a flask of pink liquid. He said it was his gift for his courage. He gave him a large elixir that completely restores health points. He said that no one could have imagined that the boy would defeat their commander. The dude said he wanted Zeke to share the secret, but Zeke said it was a company secret. Our hero emptied the flask, and the guy kept asking if he had joined the guild. And if not, then after such a fight, their commander would definitely not be against inviting him to join their team. Zeke replied that they had descended on him in a crowd 5 minutes ago, beaten him up, tied him up, and dragged him in for execution, and now they wanted him to become a member of their group. That was a bit much. The man agreed that they had been a bit harsh, but he was also to blame for breaking their commander's favorite sword and running away. So now they were even. But he didn't remember breaking anyone's equipment. And then he finally remembered how, at the beginning of his blacksmithing career, he had broken Guilford's sword. And he said that it was settled, and he was ready to forget the past. With that, they shook hands. He jokingly called him Big Brother, knowing that the topic of age was a sensitive one for them. They started arguing about this again. Zeke waved at Guilford and said he apologized for the incident with the sword. Guilford screamed and said that was not the case and called him an idiot. Meanwhile, it was morning in the tent city. The two were sitting and trying to eat camp food. They argued among themselves that the food was poorly prepared and inedible. The second one told him to remove the sense of taste in the settings. There was nothing else anyway. The merchant Lizzie approached them and sympathized with them that they had used up all their supplies. Lizzie handed them a golden apple and asked if they would like something similar. They jumped up. The golden apple is a very expensive item. Lizzie said that she was dropping the price from 10,000 to 1,000 especially for them. Everyone started ordering apples in a row. There was even a crush. Everyone was shouting that they were first in line. Lizzie quickly filled the bag with money and thought that today was her success again. Zeke sat near the tent and painted apples gold, and he thought that the vendor was completely vicious and loved money to the point of madness. She was ready to do anything for money. She said that he was still young and green to understand that everything in this world is driven by money, and that it was not the level and skills that needed to be increased, but the wallet and inventory. She said that she would not order anything more when he finished, and that she herself went to collect herbs. As he painted another apple gold, he thought that it was no wonder that Lizzie was so obsessed with money. He finished another apple and decided it was pretty good. He drew eyes and a mouth on it. Zeke decided to name the apple Wilson. He wanted the apple to be his companion until they got to Nosark. Suddenly, with his sixth sense, he realized that a blade was flying at him, and he put the apple out to meet it. The blade sank into the apple up to the hilt. He looked closer and realized that it was a shuriken. The alarm was raised in the camp. The fighters were ordered to take up defensive positions because an attack had taken place. Many in the camp were struck by these blades. Multiple player death effects occurred, removing them from the game field. Someone held a knife to Guilford's shoulder from behind, but our hero rushed to his aid and activated the weapon's destruction effect. Zeke told Guilford that the old man was now in his debt, since he had just saved his life. but he retorted that such an attack would not have left even a scratch. The number of losses was quite large. A man in black clothes was calmly squatting on a large stone. Guilford pointed his swords at him and demanded that the killer give his name. He said that he is the best of the assassins and the one who leads the Black Crescent. Everyone screamed in horror, because the Black Crescent was a guild of hired killers. He confirmed this and said his name. His name was Kira, and he was rank 89. His profession was assassin. Someone hired assassins to interfere with the trade between the Barcus Kingdom and Nosark. Guilford's group was actively discussing whether this was the same Kira, the famous ranker. They saw the assassin in his fighting stance and were afraid that they would all die. Kira put his finger to his lips and said that he had not come to kill. His true goal was to delay them and gain the title of Patriot in the shadows. He offered them to surrender so that he would not have to stain his hands with their blood. But the expedition members told Kira not to joke like that, because they spent a lot of money to get into this quest, and who would then return the participants' investments? They suggested that Kira return the money to them, then they would think about it. Then an arrow flew at one of them from the side. Guilford said these were not negotiations, but a mere formality. Kira, standing on a rock, said that they were surrounded by hundreds of his followers, and that they had no options. If they did not surrender, they would kill everyone. Guilford said he sensed a presence, but not hundreds, because Kira was bluffing. But there were a lot of them in the forest, and they would definitely have problems. He wanted to provoke him and distract his attention. He asked Hyun Seok to block the view from the forest with magic. He said he would give signals using the fingers of the hand he held behind his back. The commander showed his subordinates to be on guard. Guilford bent first 3 fingers, then 2. Zeke said that he was not an assassin, but some kind of petty thief. He bent his fingers in warning, and when he clenched his fist completely, it meant stop. Zeke stepped forward and said that no assassin would reveal himself and then lecture his victims. He had to kill them all before they noticed him. And Zeke continued that if he was a real ranker, he should fight with dignity, one-on-one, and not surround himself with followers and use dirty tricks. Kira said that he was irritated by the blacksmith's cockroach voice. He mocked him for breaking his weapon and now pretending to be a tough guy, a worthless craftsman. He pointed his finger at Zeke and ordered his men to kill the talkative blacksmith. Zeke and his group didn't know where to expect the attack from. Zeke chuckled that an attack of this level required everyone to fight it off together, and they stood shoulder to shoulder, preparing for battle. Guilford turned to his assistant and said it was time for him to act. Hyun-suk covered the group with magic. Kira ordered his soldiers to kill everyone and leave no one alive. Guilford said that only those who attack will die. The commander switched on berserker mode. Kira told Guilford that he was a little lacking in speed. The system informed Guilford that the berserk mode was cancelled due to low stats. The effect of Hydra's blood was received. Health points and stats were reduced by 50%. Zeke thought he was a genius. Literally a second before death, I opened my inventory and took out the log armor. Log armor is a log-shaped armor that protects the entire body. It is too heavy, and therefore the user cannot move. He hoped that the red tigers would sort everything out themselves, and he would sit in the log for now. Zeke decided it was time to get out of the log. What he saw simply shocked him. The corpses of the red tigers were lying everywhere. Zeke did not expect that they would lose. The system reported that the Hydra effect was received. Health points and stats are reduced by 50%. Hydra blood is an item that drops from the Hydra, the boss of the Kadria dungeon. This is a powerful poison that instantly reduces health and stats. He wondered if their breakfast had been poisoned, and that was why it tasted so bad. Zeke was chased by an assassin. Meanwhile, Guilford fought bravely against the assassins who attacked him. Kira didn't expect that damn monster to last this long. Guilford was at such a level that even after being poisoned, Kira's attacks didn't work. The commander understood that they were currently at a disadvantage. He decided to take the players away. Zeke dodged the attacks, but he knew he would soon be caught. He knew he had to hide immediately to survive. Zeke decided to hide in the forest. In the forest, The assassins gutted the property of the expedition members they had killed. Kira told the Black Crescent to prepare to move out. They were preparing to give chase when the scouting party returned. The assassins said they were ready. Suddenly, Kira's sensitive hearing caught some rustling in the bushes. Lizzie the merchant hid behind a tree, trembling with fear. Kira was about to order a search of the forest, but he was informed that the reconnaissance team had returned and reported that Guilford and the survivors were heading towards Rocking Bridge Canyon. Kira was delighted with this news. He swung his sword around himself and the trees fell, cut off like stalks. Lizzie got away with it. Kira ordered the Black Crescent group to move towards the canyon. They hoped to get there first and attack when they got there. They turned and walked away, and Lizzie exhaled. Lizzie recognized them. She realized that this was the same guild of hired killers, and even with a rancor. Judging by the number of bodies and things, more than half of the expedition perished. And if the rest of them got into another ambush, the game would be over. Lizzie realized that she had to warn them quickly, but it was not to be. Her way was blocked by some huge monster, similar to a cyclops. Lizzie recognized the yellow ogre and quickly ran away. But she couldn't run far. She began to remember events from her real life. The manager handed her an envelope and told her it was her bonus, a reward for her efforts and for her to buy herself something. She was happy, because if she added this money to what she had already saved, she would be able to continue her studies. Chisu came to her piano academy, but then she got a call on her mobile. It was her sister, who said that something bad had happened to their dad. He was admitted to the central hospital and urgent payment was needed for his treatment, and she had to transfer all the money she had. She convinced herself that money comes and goes, but she needed to help her family. Her dream of becoming a pianist never came true, and now the same situation was repeated in the game as in real life. She tried so hard to earn money, and they wanted to take it away. She told herself that she would never give up again, and she would never give up her property. And Lizzie began to throw stones at the giant, but it was like a poultice on a dead man. She understood that her efforts would not lead to success, but she fought the giant like a madwoman. And suddenly, the ogre disappeared. Only his things remained. She sat on her knees and did not understand what had happened to the giant and why he was killed. Zeke next to her. He said that it finally worked. Lizzie asked what Zeke was doing here and where did he suddenly appear from. 30 minutes ago, he tried to hide in the forest from the pursuit of assassins. They saw him running into the forest. They followed the noise they heard. He barely managed to tear himself away from them. Now he needed a real antidote. Just when he thought he had escaped the assassins, a giant appeared next to him. The yellow ogre was a rare mob that spawned near Mount Nemesis. For his level, he has high attack, so battles with him are often avoided. However, it drops a large antidote, and an experienced fighter can easily deal with the ogre. Zik learned this information about the ogre from the game forum. No matter how great the attack power is, it's useless if you can hit. He tried to hit the ogre's weak spot. Zeke took a large antidote, which combines the effect of other antidotes, healing any abnormal conditions. Lizzie said she didn't believe he was the one who killed the ogre, since he was just a blacksmith. He said that if she doesn't take his word for it, then she should check his game account, where it is stated that he, Zeke, is the conqueror of ogres, the one who strikes fear into the hearts of ogres. He explained to her that his attack power was small, but it was enough to hit him until he died. Lizzie was angry that it was not she who killed him. Now, after taking the potion, Zeke was completely healed. Lizzie decided to hell with this blacksmith. She wouldn't have been able to handle the ogre on her own anyway. Zeke's joy knew no bounds. Lizzie suggested Zeke to work together. He was surprised by this turn of events. From a slave, he turned into a companion. She said she had a plan to defeat the Black Crescent gang. Meanwhile, Guilford's group approached the bridge. Seeing the Guildford Bridge, he said they were almost there. But that was not the end. Kira was confident that he had hidden his presence well, but Guilford felt that he was there. He told Kira that this was the life experience of an adult man. Kira said that Guilford talks a lot, but will ultimately be destroyed by this little thing. Guilford saw many assassins behind Cyrus. They began to shoot arrows at the group from above. Guilford Hensek's right hand. Kira said that the reputation of the Storm Guilford group had been greatly exaggerated, and now it was time to deal the final blow. Kira heard an approaching noise. It was the damned blacksmith Zeke again. Zeke shouted for the petty thief Kira to catch the gift. Kira drew his sword. He said that Zeke had managed to escape, and now he had returned to them, and that he was tired of living. But then he smelled a strange smell. Zeke threw a bottle of flammable liquid at him. The bottle fell on Cyrus's foot and caught fire. Bottles were falling all around and fire was rising. The idea for this whole fire show was Lizzie's. She, too, was on the warpath against the assassins. She created an explosive spirit. Lizzie was a merchant and took the barrels to sell because the dwarves liked to drink wine. It was a very strong alcohol. She decided to show Zeke how strong alcohol is. She took a match and lit the puddle of drink. It burned brightly. Even a few drops exploded on contact with the fire. Zeke said that if they could pour it all on Kira and then set it on fire, there would be a big boom. Our hero said that even a ranker would die from such fire. The plan was excellent. Zeke told Lizzie that if they, say, somehow get rid of Kira, but what to do with the rest of the assassins? Lizzie said they needed to be blown up along with Kira, but Zeke countered that there was no chance that Turkey would be standing near the group. The blacksmith was sure that he would climb to the most visible place while the others were hiding. He doubted that killing Cyrus would solve the assassin problem. There were too many of them. Lizzie asked if he had a better idea. He said they would need to hide somewhere before the attack. Zeke came up with a simple plan. Blow up all possible shelters. And they did as he said, and they themselves barely escaped with their lives. Zeke showed the places where, if undermined, the canyon would collapse. He told Lizzie to blow up the barrels on his command. Lizzie looked at him and couldn't understand what he really was. Zeke was too strong and smart for a simple blacksmith. When Zeke saw the explosion, he was very happy that everything had worked out, and that it had all worked. The more he learned about the structure skill, the more fun it became. He decided to do more research when he finished the quest. Zeke saw that Kira survived such an explosion. He thought that the rankers were nothing but monsters. Kira shouted that the blacksmith would regret this. The expedition group entered the bridge. They did so with great caution. Stormy Guilford said he didn't know why that explosion happened, but thanks to it, they survived. They decided to leave quickly before the Black Crescent caught up with them, to Guilford screaming for him to wait for her. Lizzie said they had bought themselves some time to get to the other side. Guilford asked if she wanted to say that she had caused the explosion. She said yes, she was with the blacksmith Zeke. They called him and told him to hurry up. The others had already crossed. Guilford said he would wait on this bank for the blacksmith. The commander was filled with gratitude to the blacksmith Zeke, who saved him twice, and he believed that he would come sooner or later. He set off an explosion in the canyon so that the expedition could escape and save him from Cyrus, so Guilford was indebted to the blacksmith. He came up with the skill of weapon destruction, and he defeated the assassins with fire. Now the blacksmith has received sudden damage. Kira said that this skill is called residual trace attack. Kira said that the blacksmith should know his place and not dare to compete with the rankers. He promised to kill him like a stinking cockroach. Kira didn't know if all the bombs had been detonated. Zeke said that he was the idiot for falling for such a scam, and he laughed loudly at the loser Kira. There is a cave of triumph in the Nemesis Mountains. Kira thought that he would have killed this freak even in real life. Suddenly a cookie flew at him. It crunched under his feet. Two irreconcilable rivals clashed in a mortal combat. And this time the blacksmith Zeke managed to hit Cyrus. Kira used the assassin skill Shadow Decoy, which summons a clone. The clone moves like the main body and disappears after taking damage. The assassin kicked our hero in the back. He admitted that Zeke had been difficult to deal with, even more difficult than Guilford. But this was definitely the end, and he moved slowly towards the blacksmith. As he spoke, a green rope became entangled around his legs. In fact, it was not a rope, but a special plant. There were no items or monsters in this cave, but there is one interesting plant, and there is no way to escape. Zeke explained to Kira that this is a cave vine. It is level 33. It grabs any objects nearby tightly and disappears itself when the capture time ends. Thus, Kira found himself unable to move. He realized that the blacksmith had lured him into a trap. Meanwhile, Zeke recovered from the blow and rose to his feet. Looking into Kira's eyes, he said that the stakes were high, but the trap worked. You had to watch your step, where to step. Kira became furious and accused the blacksmith of foul play. Because Zeke had no weapons or fighting skills, he used various clever tricks. Zeke replied that he had no need for that, and that he had killed the giant stone golem with his bare hands using a mining pick. The pickaxe has a frenzy mode, and is as good as any other weapon. Kira only laughed in response at this super weapon. Zeke wanted to test the power of the pickaxe on Kira now, and went on the attack. Kira managed to dodge to the side, and the full force of the blow hit the cave wall. The pickaxe sank deep into the stone. Kira said that Zeke was pathetic and ridiculous in his fighting efforts, but he himself couldn't even hit a decent target. Zeke looked at him with irony and replied that he had indeed hit the core of the wall of this cave and destroyed it. And very soon this wall will collapse. Kira doubted that just one hit with a pickaxe could cause a collapse, and that in all his years of playing the game, he had never heard of a wall-breaking skill, that it was a bluff. And then he clearly saw and heard the wall shake. His pride would not allow him to accept that some simple craftsman could oppose him. He did not understand that he was seconds away from death. He didn't understand just one thing: why the blacksmith wanted to bury him under the rubble along with himself. But Kira forgot that he was the only one motionless because of the damned vine. Like a fly on Velcro, he was caught in another hold and was immobilized for 10 seconds. But his pride still screamed that the great Kira could not be defeated by some pathetic blacksmith. And at that very moment, he was buried under a collapsed wall. Kira and the group of assassins were finished, and they failed in their mission to attack the expedition. Meanwhile, at the bridge, the expedition members tried to persuade Guilford to admit that Zeke was dead, not to wait for him, but to move on with the others. But Guilford was stubborn and argued that Zeke didn't look like a man who could just die, and that he hoped the boy would come. Then someone said that it would be a good idea to watch your words. A man was approaching them. Zeke came up to them and said that he was back with them and alive again, albeit a little battered. Guilford and the others were incredibly happy to see him alive. The rest is a matter of time and youth. Zeke showed the ring on his hand and said that it was good that Lizzie had sold him the item that ended up saving his life. He told people what happened in the cave and what was Kira's fate. There in the dungeon, Zeke had only one chance to escape the collapse. The blacksmith understood that he would not have time to run to the exit of the cave. But with the ring, Lizzie will at least be able to get out of the main collapse zone. And then, as luck would have it, he put on the ring and teleported 20 meters back, towards the exit. And although he was also hit by many stones, he still survived, although he was badly maimed. And the proud ranker Kira remained buried under the rubble and ceased to exist as a character. Our hero mentally thanked the merchant Lizzie, although he believed that the rogue had cheated him. But Lizzie would not be herself. She thought that such guys are rare to meet, and she should try to make Zeke her slave. He had a defective item, but he still found a use for it and survived the fight against the ranker. She hugged him tightly and reminded him that he should be grateful to his older sister Lizzie for his miraculous rescue. Zeke thought that he was able to defeat Kira single-handedly, unlike the shaggy old man Guilford, who only knows how to talk and threaten. Continued to punctuate each other playfully for some time. The blacksmith reminded them that they had a mission, and it was time to move on. And so the expedition from the kingdom of Barcus arrived in Nosark. They approached the large city gates and knocked. The quest to establish a trade route between Barcus and Nosark was successfully completed. The expedition, although losing many along the way, reached its final destination. Of the 80 adventurers, only 28 survived. These people will receive gifts from the king himself. The reward was 3,000 experience points and 700 prestige points. Blacksmith Zeke has reached level 55. Now he can create and repair C-rank equipment. He received the VDEC shield as a gift from the king. It is an A-rank item for the blacksmith only. It has a special skill. It can block any attack once a day. Since the young man named Khan registered in Arpedia under the nickname of the blacksmith Zik. This player previously owned the character Bark, who was a top ranker, but then his profile was hacked and the character was destroyed. After the creation of Zeke showed signs of unconventional play, Blacksmith Zeke has defeated the rampaging stone golem that triggers the hidden event and has been transported to Nosark, where the hidden trigger for this event is located. Arpedia development team decided at a general meeting that this user has a high chance of getting the Mycenia event. They discussed that, let's say, a level 55 blacksmith would somehow be able to activate the event, but is it right to delay the game update because of his exploits? Others countered that this event could bring big changes to the entire Arpedia, and if it overlaps with the release of the update, users could get confused. The main opponent was the head of the department, Kim. Some of those present told him that his words did not make any sense. It took 3 years for the rampaging stone golem to appear. 3 years. And he claims they now have to delay the update because of the low-level blacksmith. They asked him if he was ready to take responsibility for possible negative consequences from the postponement of the date. He said he was ready. They were waiting for the final decision from director Song Seok-jin. The director was so busy preparing for the meeting that he completely forgot about it. He apologized to the assembled group. He was asked what he meant by these words. Director Song Seok-jin supported Mr. Kim's point of view and stated that he would take responsibility for the delay in the upgrade. The opponents were amazed that he had so much faith in the blacksmith. Song Seok-jin said that there are some changes. He would like to add some things in the upcoming update, so it will take a little more time to implement them. His plans included expanding the content, expanding the production professions, new professions, expanding the story of the witch Deborah, and massively expanding the ability to create items. Underwater monsters and item sharing, plus a whopping 300 new hidden skills. The director asked the astonished crowd what they thought about it. Everyone was simply shocked by the scale of the upcoming innovations and said that it would take a lot of time. Director Song Seok-jin stated that if they do not achieve the expected growth figures, he is prepared to take personal responsibility. Some said that even if we forget that this is not related to the original topic, such a large-scale update would take at least 2 years. But the director said that he did most of the work on vacation. The development team only needs to finalize his sketches and make the final push. Sun Seok-jin was a genius in his own right. He asked if they thought the game was stagnant and boring in its original form and wanted to see it revolutionized. Khan was lying in his room on a mattress on the floor and screaming at the top of his lungs that the damn hacker had finally been caught. He had hidden in Nosarka and thought that they wouldn't find him. Khan had waited for this day for so long and had specially created the blacksmith Zik. The younger brother stood and looked at Khan with sympathy. Khan yelled at the invisible hacker to get his ass ready. The brother sighed and walked out of his room. The parents were sitting at the table and asked what happened and why Khan didn't come down for breakfast. The younger brother replied that most likely Khan had been playing all night again and was now fast asleep. Mom was furious because Khan promised that he would pull himself together and study, but he continued to play his virtual games. Dad, however, was not so categorical. Dad said it would be better if Khan did something he himself enjoyed than he had in the recent past. Mom snapped that it was because of his dad's behavior that her son grew up like this. The worst thing is that he is not able to earn enough to live on his own. Dad argued that money doesn't buy happiness and that eventually Han will be able to run the family store, and that he believes that his eldest son will find his way. The father remembered that the family could not help Khan when he was going through hard times, so they should let him do what he liked. But the father was worried about his son's health. During this family conversation, Khan stood behind the wall and eavesdropped. He was grateful to his father for such support. The little devil inside him clapped his hands and suggested that he reinforce this wisdom by skipping today's classes. But he feared his mother's wrath more than all the bandits of Arpedia. Khan decided to go outside in the evening and take a short walk to think about his current state of affairs. His thoughts were not at all happy. In real life, unlike in the game, he did not shine with success. He was struck by his father's words that his family had failed to help him during difficult times. Khan decided that his parents had too many unnecessary worries, and he had almost forgotten that unpleasant incident. He placed the tin can he was holding on the bench. The memories took him back to high school. Han had just turned 18. He found a dead rat in his food bowl. This was unrealistic in a school cafeteria where all sanitary norms were strictly observed. So the rat was put in his soup on purpose. Those sitting nearby giggled that he himself complained that there was not enough meat in the food. The students were already openly laughing at him and filming videos to post on social media. First, they posted these photos and videos in the school chat. The door of the classroom where Han studied was kicked down by some guy. He asked if that idiot Khan was here. It was Kim Chun, who had recently transferred to them from Yawon Middle School. Everyone at that school called him crazy, and he could hit you just like that, even if you just looked in his direction. He pointed his finger at our hero and asked again if this was the same Khan. The funniest thing is that Khan was sleeping at that moment, his head on his hands. Kim Chung grabbed Han by the hair and lifted his head up. He thought it was the teacher and muttered an apology. The guy yelled for that asshole Khan to wake up, and he hit Khan in the face with all his might. He fell to the floor, covered in blood. Kim Chun rubbed his hand contentedly. He told Khan that he was finished. Then there was a fight. After school, he trudged home, beaten. The parents asked what was wrong with his face and whether he had been in a fight. Khan evaded the answer and said that he had fallen down the stairs. Mom didn't go into details and said that if it hurt a lot, she could take him to the hospital. And although he was definitely not okay, he said there was nothing to worry about. From that day on, his life became a living hell. Kim Chung was constantly looking for Han to attack. He chose him as a whipping boy and an object of ridicule. The children's collective is such that no one wants to be friends with a loser or to fight with a leader. So gradually, Khan found himself isolated. Every day he was beaten, bullied, and insulted. Again and again. And when he asked what he had done wrong to them, why they were doing this to him, they laughed at him and made fun of him even more. And so they bullied the boy day after day. Now, Kim Chun was not the only one beating him. Some of the students joined the leader, who enjoyed showing their strength over the defenseless and lonely Han. The situation became more complicated every day. They laughed that he imagined himself to be a tragic character and grimaced, parodying his complaints and calls for justice. Kim Chun said that since he was asking such questions, he would have to answer them. They dragged him into the school toilet. Someone was already waiting for them there. There stood Hyun Il. He was the high school president and the recognized star of the high school. Khan recognized him and looked with hope at the guy who always and everywhere took first place. The guy really hoped that he would now stop this nightmare once and for all. He leaned over Han, who was lying on the floor, and asked him what he heard, that he was wondering why he was being beaten all the time. Hyun Il said that he would explain it to him now. He picked him up, grabbed his head, and said clearly right into his ear. He said clearly that they beat him for no reason. Because he doesn't like him personally, and there is no reason to beat up the idiot. And the whole crowd of offenders stood and laughed loudly at the naive fool. It's simple. Hyun Il set them on him for complaining about the cafeteria in the school chat. Khan, sitting now on the bench, painfully recalled that terrible day. He said that it was better for Hyun Il, that son of a bitch, to never catch his eye, because with his current fighting skills, Han would turn him into a cutlet. Suddenly a napkin stuck to his face. Our hero couldn't see anything because of her. Suddenly he bumped into someone. The person pushed him away, and Khan fell to the ground. The guy asked if Khan wanted to apologize for pushing him. Our hero was about to apologize when he recognized this guy. It was none other than Kim Chun. He didn't seem to recognize him and continued to demand an apology. Kim Chun, like back in school, grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and lifted him up like a puppy. The worst thing was that Han began to shake from the sticky feeling of fear. He couldn't understand where Kim Chun came from in their area. Kim Chun clearly had the intention of fighting and was already clenching his fist for a crushing blow. But then his phone rang, and he muttered that the idiot was lucky this time. Busy with his phone, he walked away, telling the idiot to watch where he was going next time. Khan hated himself for showing weakness. If only Khan could know where his offender was going. Kim Chun was going to meet his friends at a cafe. It turned out that they were all also active players in Arpedia. They were discussing the need to raise taxes in the game. They discussed how a new trade route had recently opened from Barkas to Nosark, and because of this, Lord Broden's treasury was now in a dire state. They discussed that the tribute from Nambarden had always been small, but doubling it right away was not an option either. Among them, Hyun-il was in charge, just like at school. He asked Kim Chun what he thought about this. He thought deeply. Although thinking was definitely not his thing, Han stood at the door of the sports fighting club. Before that meeting with Chun at the bus stop, he was sure that he had worked through his childhood grievances and had become strong from winning games. But the sticky feeling of helplessness and fear he experienced showed that he was not okay at all, and that his self-esteem was as low as it had been at school. The gestalt was not closed, and he went to learn to stand up for himself at a martial arts school. He vowed to become a stronger version of himself. But the main thing is that he realized that no virtual victories make you strong in the real world. He wanted to raise his body level first, and then his mentality would come along. He came to the club and said he wanted to study martial arts. But he cut his words short in fear. When he saw how hard the athletes were fighting in the gym, Khan flew out of the gym like a bullet. He immediately remembered that he was unemployed and had no money for training. It was not the first time the coach saw such a reaction from newcomers. He asked if the newcomer would like to enroll in their school. Khan replied that he had entered by accident and had entered the wrong door. Close to him, he was like a mountain of muscles. They looked into each other's eyes and recognized each other. Looking him in the eye was Stormy Guilford himself. The entire martial arts school section in the game turned out to be the Red Tiger's base. Now these guys understood why the gait and gestures of the blacksmith Zeke were so familiar to them. They couldn't believe that the brave and resourceful blacksmith Zeke in the game in real life turned out to be a complete dunce and loser who now came to learn how to fight. They interrogated him about what had prompted him, Khan, to come to the martial arts section, already being an adult. He resisted and said that he had just happened to be passing by. The assistant coach told Khan to join them because coincidences are not coincidences. And as a bonus, he gets a free membership for a whole year. The coach looked and thought that in a year, he would knock all the nonsense out of this idiot and teach him good manners, and most importantly, self-respect. Khan was so backed up that he was forced to agree. These guys knew him inside out, so he could be himself, and he started filling out an application to join the fight club. All the guys were interested in his real name. The coach said that he had heard his name somewhere before, and he remembered. He used to often go to one small shop, and the owner's son was called Kang Yu-han, and this boy was friends with his daughter. Khan couldn't believe his ears. Life stubbornly returned him to the past. Truly, unclosed gestalts catch up. Khan asked the coach his name. He was surprised that he hadn't introduced himself yet. He said his name was Song Tae-soo. Our hero asked his daughter's name. The coach said his daughter's name was Chae-rin. It all matched. The Khan laughed and said that he and his uncle hadn't seen each other for a long time. The coach didn't understand what he meant. He realized that he wasn't wrong and it was definitely him. Our hero was back in the game, lying flat on the ground. The system was telling him he was in a low stamina state for 30 minutes. Hell, he thought. The coach said that it could be considered that fate had brought them together again and that he would personally train him. After this hellish training, he somehow dragged his exhausted body home. To distract himself, Khan went to Arpedia. Blacksmith Zeke stood in front of the closed door. Then he gathered his courage and knocked. His goal was to get a quest from the gnomes and, after completing it, level up. Or maybe even master a hidden skill. But it was not to be. He got kicked and flew away from the door. The gnomes turned out to be not very hospitable guys. He repeated the attempt several times with the same result. Zeke had heard that gnomes were a very closed race, but not that closed. The gnomes were angry that they were fed up with this man, and anyway, they thought that people were of no use. They didn't even want to say a word for thanks, let alone share any information. The gnomes were sure that the man had come to steal their production secret. They rudely and obscenely sent him to his own mother. Zeke was upset by their wild manners and bad upbringing. He felt that they would soon chase him with knives. The system notified him that he didn't have enough stamina and urgently needed to get some food. But there were no other shops around except the greengrocer's. So he trudged there. The prices there were so high that even the scoundrel Lizzie nervously smoked on the sidelines. A raw potato cost as much as 1,200 gold. And that was no joke. He asked the old man who sold the potatoes what was so unusual about them that they cost a fortune and were kept behind glass. The old man said that of the two of them, he was definitely not the joker, and his store was the cheapest in the whole country. Zeke thought that direct trade had only just started, and prices had not yet normalized. He asked to sell him one, but the system said that he only had 817 gold in his account. He had already forgotten that he had used all the money to order iron in the gold rush. He asked in a pleading voice for a discount of 400 gold. This gnome was no more hospitable than the previous ones, and Zeke received another magical kick and flew out the door. Khan found himself back in real life. He would have eaten an elephant with bones and skin right now. Our hero even thought about dying, because after rebirth, his endurance is at its maximum. But dying now would be an unforgivable luxury. After all, it took him so much effort to raise Zeke's level to his current one. He had no choice. He would have to sell something. The only valuable thing he had with him was the Shield of the Videk, a gift from the King of Barkas. A very valuable thing, but hunger is no ant. He was very sorry to part with the shield because it came with such a rare skill. He could not count on being able to earn money as a blacksmith in this damned dwarven village. As if hearing his thoughts, a bearded gnome with glasses on his forehead came up to Zeke and said that he really liked his shield. The gnome wanted to buy it. Zeke grabbed the shield and said he wouldn't sell it because it was his greatest treasure. But he was secretly glad that a buyer was found right away. The gnome offered 5 large gold coins and not a penny more. In the dwarven monetary system, that was 5 million gold. He said he agreed and handed the shield to the dwarf. He grumbled that this thing had cost him too much and poured a handful of coins into his hands. Zeke said that Daddy had gone completely nuts. And where was the rest? It was only 500 gold. But the gnome mockingly said goodbye and ran away. He didn't just run away, he drove away in a car. Zeke stood there and shouted after him for the swindler to give him back his shield. In short, in the land of the gnomes, simpleton Zeke was always getting into trouble. He ran after his jalopy and started banging on the door of his house. Zeke promised to spend the rest of his life under his door. The gnome in his house was breaking apart his precious shield with the sole purpose of getting the precious stones out of it. Finally, he succeeded. The gnome wondered if this stone was connected with that one. He had one very important character in mind. Zeke sat by his door and gnawed the ground from hunger, but was determined to get back his shield, which he had so stupidly lost. He thought that there was no point in throwing cookies around in the cave. He shouted at the dwarf in rage that he would kill him. Suddenly, he heard voices and realized that there was someone nearby. He saw 3 little brats who were standing and laughing at him. They were asked if they were ready. Zeke didn't understand why. They replied that they were always ready. These youngsters were painting all sorts of obscene inscriptions on the wall, shaking with laughter. Zeke watched them from behind a rock. The three rather plump hooligans continued their dirty work. He came out from behind the rock and walked towards them. Zeke shouted at them sternly. They started making excuses, saying that it wasn't what he thought. He said that he didn't think anything and asked for a brush and paint, and that their paintings can't be called drawings, and if you're going to draw, you have to do it properly. The gnome sat with the stones and thought that the magic waves did not match. He felt sorry for the money he had spent, but now there was nothing to be done, and the gnome decided to go to the ice palace. But he knew that there would probably be a fight there, and the dwarf didn't like that. He wouldn't mind if someone went there instead of him. He walked out of his house and saw the door painted red and the simpleton from whom he had bought the shield. Zeke shouted that the gnome had finally come out of his hole. He grabbed the dwarf by the barges and demanded that he return the shield. Zeke said that he had to go through so much to get this shield as a reward, and the impudent dwarf gave him only 500 gold pieces. And he believed in his honest intentions and that he would give 5 big gold pieces. The gnome thought that this man was an idiot, but suddenly the gnome noticed that his house was covered in various graffiti. In some places it was even beautiful, in others obscene. Little pussies were laughing nearby. The gnome looked thoughtfully at his house and asked if it was he who helped the hooligans. The blacksmith shouted that compared to his deception, this was just child's play. The gnome thought that Zeke's drawings also looked like childish scribbles, but he clearly wanted to depict a broken arm. Totally cool. From Zeke's clothes, the dwarf realized that in his human world, he clearly had the profession of a blacksmith, and he had the idea to entrust him with this. The Puzdiuks got tired of their argument and went home, and Zeke kept demanding that his favorite sword be returned, but the dwarf seemed not to hear him. Finally, he promised to return the shield, but demanded to let him go. He handed Zeke a bag containing the remains of a broken shield. Zeke was speechless, and then asked furiously, "What is this?" The dwarf said that it was a shield that he had honestly bought. All that remained of the shield was the steel plate made of golden mithril alloy, the strong handle of the shield, and the garnet filled with magical power. The gnome assured that he had smashed it very carefully and that the blacksmith could put it back together as easily as 2 fingers on the asphalt. Zeke was stunned by the impudence of this bearded scoundrel. Zeke filled with rage and turned crimson. The gnome realized that things were going badly. Zeke grabbed the gnome by the shoulders and started shaking him like a pear. Suddenly he heard a question that asked him to tell how he could do such a thing. The standard skills that blacksmiths have are creating and repairing weapons. But in order to make weapons from expensive materials, you need to follow the instructions. If you make a mistake in manufacturing, you can suffer big losses. But what happens if you disassemble a poorly designed weapon? Then you can create new, unknown weapons by recycling the materials you used. This way, you can even create items with unusual characteristics. And this meant that the existing items could be changed at the master's will. Zeke urgently needed to learn the skill, and the shield was not the most important thing now. He pestered the dwarf to teach him. The gnome realized that he wouldn't be able to get rid of this moron so easily, and had to promise to take Zeke as an apprentice. But Zeke knew that the gnomes didn't want to share their skills with other races. So the gnome is up to some kind of scam again to fool Zeke. Zeke smelled mold. The gnome told our hero to follow him into the basement. They went down the steps, and the smell grew stronger. The gnome asked if Zeke knew anything about Andurus. Zeke did. Andurus was the name of a legendary monster that lived in the northeast of Nosarka. He loves jewelry, so the gnomes appease him with precious stones and handicrafts. He is actually an ordinary, docile dragon, but I am envious that he has so many jewels from the dwarves. The gnome continued that there were fools who presented this lizard with handicrafts and even precious stones. The gnome was going to kill the dragon and develop the gold mines in the north. No more and no less. Zeke jokingly asked if the dwarf was going to kindly send him to kill Andurus in his place. The gnome ignored his remark and said that for this grand plan, he had created this thing. It was the masterpiece of his life. Mech's dragon. Zeke said he didn't believe that this thing could move. The gnome thought that the guest was really crazy. He said that it didn't move, of course. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left it in the basement. Zeke said that in that case it was just a huge tin can. But the gnome advised him not to rush to conclusions. He continued that all the parts in it were perfectly adjusted and performed their functions. The main task now was to find a suitable energy carrier whose shape and wavelength matched. Then it will provide enough energy for the nanopower turbine. And the dwarf thought that it is possible to use artificial mana power, but it can cause overloads and polar errors. Zeke thought that it could be made into a weapon and asked the gnome to continue his interesting story. The gnome said that it was time to get down to business. The dwarf wanted Zeke to go to the Ice Palace. It was a dungeon that had appeared just 2 weeks ago at the end of the northern Ice Valley. It was not an easy task. Meanwhile, events were unfolding in the palace. Someone in a cloak and with a sword caused a fiery explosion. Then he entered into a fight with a skeleton in armor and a crown on his head. The skeleton's eyes sparkled with an ominous fire. The skeleton was hit by an arrow. The girl with the bow and the boy in the cloak stood back to back. She had just saved his life. They said that the rumors about this being Deborah's hidden dungeon were true, and even the monsters here were painfully familiar, like in her lair. Suddenly, a bolt of light burst forth. They screamed for Irene to stop doing this immediately. She replied that it was an accident, but the couple accused Irene of doing it on purpose. Irene ignored it and said she didn't understand why a new dungeon appeared before the Arpedia update. The guy said that there are many different rumors about this on the players' forum, but it seems that everyone has agreed on the most likely hypothesis. The archer said that about 2 weeks ago she cleared Deborah's dungeon, and then the girl suddenly remembered that she had promised something to one guy. She was very ashamed of her forgetfulness. She promised the blacksmith Zeke that she would write to him in Messenger. In general, it turned out badly because he helped her so much then. She promised herself that she would definitely fix this. Here, a fourth character joined them. He didn't look so good. They all started asking what had happened to him and promised to treat him. Loki, that was the name of the fourth, pointed his finger at a figure nearby. All four turned their heads in that direction and decided that it was another monster. Saya loaded her bow and had already pulled the string. But the thick fog prevented her from aiming. It needed to clear up at least a little. She tried to make out through the fog what kind of figure it was. Suddenly, I heard a painfully familiar voice cursing that I couldn't see anything through this damn fog. He recognized the girl and called her by name. She exclaimed that Zeke was dead. She asked him what he was doing there and why he was alone in such a dangerous place. He joked that he was sent here by a clever gnome, but he didn't say that monsters lived in the palace, although it's possible that he himself has never been there. On the dungeon map, Zeke recognized Deborah's tree soldiers, but now, if he looked closely, they were slightly different. Perhaps this was Deborah's secret development. The gnome said that this creature could start his car, which Zeke called a tin can. Zeke couldn't believe that a tree dummy could do such a thing. The dwarf said that Deborah is a genius in magical engineering. Despite its small size, the heart that Deborah created for the new tree soldier has a strong energy. The heart of one tree soldier would not be enough, but if the dwarf could study it, he could recreate the energy source and revive his dragon. The gnome said that this was a test for him, and if he could handle it, he would take him as an apprentice. The gnome asked to get 30 hearts of the new type of wood soldiers. He told all this to Sia and her group. She said, "What does that mean? He came here to do his quest? And why does he do it?" Zeke replied that he was going through hard times, and he simply had to undergo training from this cunning gnome. The damn bearded man wouldn't agree to anything else. He added that he himself was interested in exploring this new dungeon. Sia invited him to join their guild. They would help him complete the quest, and he would help them clear the area. He replied that he was a bit of an introvert, and the number of members in the group was overwhelming him. Besides, cleansing was not his goal at the moment. The group also thought that a blacksmith was not needed. Sia tried to persuade Irene not to perform. Zeke thanked for the trust and interest in his person, but said that he could handle it himself. But Sia grabbed his hand and didn't want to let go. Irene set up a light shield. It was a provocation for the monsters. The group used a series of shots and a rock attack. Together they managed to kill one wooden soldier of the new model. The system reported that Zeke had obtained the heart of a wooden soldier. Then again, and eventually he collected the required number of hearts. The system reported that he had completed the quest to collect hearts. He hesitated about what to do next, since he had completed his task, but he really wanted to complete the cleanup with the group. Irene threw him a mocking glance that the blacksmith uncle could have done something useful for the group. But he only collected items in his knapsack, like a real egoist. Sia said that Irene is wrong and Zeke is just saving energy now, and that if he shows his power, Irene will be shocked, and he asked Zeke to confirm it. And he stood there dumbfounded that Irene had called him uncle. It was very unpleasant, and he remembered how he had teased old Guilford. He said he wanted to do something for them too. The group approached the boss's room. They agreed to use the necessary items, each took their weapons and went to fight the owner of the palace. Irene was a very lively girl and said that she wanted to go in there first. Sia tried to dissuade her, arguing that it was dangerous to go alone. But Irene still ran inside. There she saw a woman covering her face with her hands. Irene told the others that there was a woman there and she was crying. Irene apologized and asked if the woman was okay, but her friends running behind her shouted at her not to touch the woman. It was a trap, and the woman screamed that the baby was caught. Irene was horrified when she saw the ugly face before her. The witch used a stone cloud, but the group managed to dodge it. She said with annoyance that the only thing humans can do is run fast. But the witch noticed that one of the people did not even try to run. The witch said contemptuously that he was probably too slow. The witch wanted to hear where the poor man's friends had gone and why they had left him alone. She promised to spare his life if he confessed. But the young man only raised his shield to protect himself. The witch said that since he wanted to die so much, let it be his way. The witch threw off her kerchief and shook her head. Instead of hair, she had poisonous snakes ready to bite their prey. Irene screamed in horror at him to run. She asked Sia what kind of scary monster it was. Sia replied that it was a poisonous jellyfish, the scariest monster in Arpedia. Loki said that there was talk on the players' forum that the main boss of the Ice Palace is a jellyfish, but no one had ever seen one before, so the information may be unreliable. Irene asked Loki not to apologize because she herself ran in there. And now, because of her, the blacksmith uncle became like this. The blacksmith covered Irene with his body and was petrified for 10 minutes. Sia told her that she asked not to humiliate the blacksmith Zeke, and that he would still show his usefulness and his strength. Sia said she had no idea how to fight this monster if its attacks turned her into stone. But Loki said not to worry about it. Loki said that he had taken a special mirror for this occasion. It was a magical mirror that could reflect anything. Finally, Zeke's petrification, it was over, and he could move again. The witch laughed that the little man's strength was already running out, but his comrades had already entered the hall and set up a light shield and a light cannon. They also used a light flame and a series of arrows. They asked Zeke if everything was okay. He replied that he was fine, and suggested to go on the counter-offensive and act according to the plan. Irene was to provide Loki with a boost to health and abilities. Loki had to hold the line. Sia had to go forward with Zeke using her long-range attacks. They wished each other luck and rushed into battle. Zeke was attacked by the jellyfish again and was petrified for 10 minutes. The witch used her poisonous attack. Sia told Irene to stay behind Loki. The blacksmith, having recovered from his petrification, ordered Sia to act. The girl pulled the bowstring and fired a powerful triple blow towards the witch. The arrows hit the witch in the neck and chest. Now it was Loki's turn and his magic mirror. He directed a beam of light from the mirror towards the witch, and his blow also damaged the witch. The witch was preparing for another petrification attack, and Loki told everyone to hide behind the columns. The group asked Loki to perform a taunt attack. Loki took out a magic mirror and, after waiting for the witch to generate a stone strike, directed the light of the mirror at the witch. The group happily shouted that it turned out great. They hoped that their plan had worked and the jellyfish had died. But Loki replied that she was not dead yet. But Loki said that they should not be afraid, because she herself had turned to stone. The mirror's reflection attack had hit the jellyfish, and it would not be able to free itself. It was practically dead, and all that was left was to deal it the final blow. They heard a strange sound. It was the witch who whispered that the worthless humans thought they had succeeded in killing her. And suddenly, the witch stopped being petrified. They couldn't understand how this could happen. Loki said that there was no time to think about it, and they had to fight again. The witch used a tricky technique called life steal. She stole their health and strength. All the players fell almost dead, and only Loki remained on his feet. He activated the passive skill wizard spirit and faint resistance. Medusa didn't have life-stealing abilities before. Something changed. Loki again pointed the magic mirror at the jellyfish, but the second time his trick did not work, and he was petrified, caught under a stone blow. Now the petrification state was active as long as the caster was alive. She walked up to the petrified Loki and took the mirror from his hands. She hated this object because it was her only weakness. But that was until the jellyfish met the witch Deborah. The witch gave the jellyfish her power and her skills, and now the jellyfish was not afraid of such things. Deborah's blessing activates automatically when your health drops below half, increases resistance to attacks, and allows you to use Deborah's magic. Medusa had now become much stronger, having received Deborah's blessing, but our friends knew nothing about this blessing, so they so boldly went on the attack. Medusa enjoyed the moment of her triumph and considered herself the strongest and invincible. Medusa cried out that she would use Deborah's own magic on them as a last resort. The dark gates opened. Everyone froze in anticipation of the end. Suddenly, Loki woke up from his petrification and saw Zeke with a sword. Zeke managed to defeat the jellyfish. The blacksmith returned to the dwarf's house and asked permission to use his forge. The dwarf asked what he was going to do. Zeke wanted to make a new weapon from the remains of the shield. It wasn't for nothing that he was called the Bolden King of Repairs, but his skills in creating weapons were no worse. Of course, due to his low rank, he couldn't restore the A-rank Videk shield, but he could make a powerful weapon with special characteristics. And Zeke forged the sword Mimun. It was a C-rank weapon and was exclusive to blacksmiths. It could only hit 100% successfully once. The sword was extremely expensive for Zeke, and he only wanted to use it when absolutely necessary. And now he had to spend it on some jellyfish. Zeke thought that it was none of his business to clear this dungeon, and he could easily run away with the collected hearts. He regretted that he had shown nobility. The group cheered and threw him in the air with cheers. Everyone said that Zeke was incredible. Anya said it was so cool. Just mind-blowing? Zeke was very embarrassed by their praise. Sia was beaming with happiness that she was alive, and that she had not made a mistake when she invited him to join them in clearing the dungeon. He had saved her life for the second time. Zeke wanted to get to the secret room of the Ice Palace. Irene screamed that they had been fooled because there were only books there, and they were expecting a reward. They searched the whole room, but there was nothing there except books. Loki said that since the room was secret, there must have been rewards there. Otherwise, what was the point of clearing it out? They assumed that the jellyfish wasn't the main boss, but Zeke said he didn't think so. Medusa was a boss character and even had hidden abilities. Maybe there was some secret hidden in the room, not just things. Suddenly Zeke fell as if he had been mown down. Everyone rushed to pick him up. The blacksmith suddenly began to laugh loudly and joyfully. Nobody understood what the hell was happening to him. Zeke told Sia to look closely at the table. There was lime. The lime was simply smeared across the stone table. So there's a reason why the stone table was plastered with lime. Zeke turned sharply and walked towards the table. There's some secret hidden inside it. He called up his material structure vision skill and began to hit the table with a hammer. An amazing picture appeared before their eyes, like a stone chronicle. Among other things, they saw a dragon that was burning an entire city to ashes. Irene squealed that the blacksmith uncle was incredibly cool. Sia said it looked like a fresco. There was something written on it, but the letters were weird. Loki said that he would now read the strange writing with the help of his wizard's monocle. The wizard's monocle made it possible, among other things, to decipher mysterious writings and even read runes. He read that the ancient Mycenaean civilization was exterminated for their arrogance because they wanted to be like the gods. The time of destruction of the air fortress is 7 hours 28 minutes. It is necessary to stop time and go to the past. They were in the center of a magic teleportation circle. Meanwhile, in the Dream Max campaign, there was a discussion of affairs within the Arpedia game. They discussed how the group of players had made significant progress in just 2 weeks. They discovered an air fortress. Everything went as they planned, and it was right to postpone the game update. If everything goes as they planned, then it will be written about everywhere. And they decided to continue to act according to the plan. Our heroes saw a message that their group had completed the Ice Palace. They also discovered the Mycenaean air fortress for the first time. All guild members are given 2,000 reputation points and the title of Air Fortress Discoverer. Now it became clear to them that this honorary title was their reward for passing through the Ice Palace. They found themselves in the air castle of Mykenia. A strange beast in armor came out to them. He said that he came to meet the guild of the Zia family. He brought them to the royal palace. He approached the king and said that guests were asking for his audience. The king gave permission to enter. Nobody understood the essence of what was happening. In the great hall, the king sat on the throne. The king said that he was Ivan III, the only king of the kingdom of Mycenia. The system said that he was level 120, and also that it is not the king himself, but his spirit. Loki explained that the spirit was unable to pass into oblivion because of its attachment to this world. The mischievous Irene said that she would now use lightning to lead him to the other world. But Loki stopped her. The king's spirit asked them to calm down and listen to him, especially since he was welcoming guests for the first time in 300 years. He told me that their kingdom of Mycenia had prospered for thousands of years. Their magical technology brought income to the world, and they ruled their kingdom peacefully. But the problem was that their technology was too advanced. Mycenae was accused of trespassing on the divine realm. The king barely survived, and several others from his city escaped in this aerial fortress. As a result, the king became a spirit. They received their punishment for creating chimeras. The spirit of the king said that he did not repent of what he had done, and that if the desire to learn and study new things is a sin, then God is also to blame for creating people so curious. The king was very upset that the knowledge of magic that his people had collected and the truth in the history of everything was disappearing. He said that this aerial fortress was the only legacy of their kingdom. The king wanted to restore the fortress and tell future generations about the exploits of Mycenae. The king's spirit asked if they could fulfill his request. They were offered a quest to reconstruct an air fortress that had fallen into the dungeon by the will of God. Irene said that we need to help this old man. Sia, although she didn't like ghosts, also agreed to participate. Zeke agreed to participate primarily because hidden quests are rare in the game. The peculiarity of the game Arpedia was that refusing a quest could lead to an unexpected fight. And they unanimously accepted this unusual quest. The game informed them that they had registered for a quest. Each participant would be given suitable personal tasks. Blacksmith Zeke had to restart the fortress's air reactor by making the broken parts himself. 3 gears and a power control device had to be created. Sia was given the task of going to the elven forest and bringing back a stone. Loki was to draw a floating magic circle at the base of the fortress. To do this, he first needs to go to Norton's tower and learn the hover spells. Irene was tasked with collecting holy water in Romney, but she didn't even know where it was. The group was told that the king had prepared gifts especially for them. The king hoped that the group would make every effort to restore the aerial fortress. All the items looked really cool. Among them was a magic necklace, book of magic, arrow bag, bow and arrows. For the blacksmith Zeke, a jacket of sacred runes, C rank, which increases skill and endurance. Such jackets were worn only by ancient masters. Full stamina restoration. That was really cool. Zeke was wondering what would happen if they successfully completed the quest. It was the largest quest in history. They wanted to ask the king one question. The king allowed it. Loki asked if it was true that they were their first guests in 300 years? And did that mean that 300 years ago they had a guest? The witch Deborah? The king said that this ungrateful woman had promised to restore the fortress, but instead had spied on their scientific achievements and then fled. Loki told Zeke that it now makes sense why the Ice Palace is connected to this place. Blacksmith Zeke also asked permission to ask a question. He asked what he needed to do and where to go to get to the land. The king did not know the answer to this question. Other players also saw the Ice Palace at the top. They discussed among themselves the incredible difficulty of its passage, and that for 2 weeks nothing had been heard about its passage. The merchant Lizzie greeted the adventurers. She asked if they had brought the magic mirror with them. They did not know what the item was for. Lizzie realized that these guys don't bother to read the game forum and don't know the latest news. She said that the boss there is a cruel jellyfish. And she told about the stone attack of the jellyfish. No one had a magic mirror. Everyone was afraid of turning into stone. Lizzie said she was always willing to help, and that she had mirrors like these for a very low price. The crowd rushed to her stall. They literally knocked Lizzie down along with her goods. Blacksmith Zeke said that if you dig in the direction where the wind sounds, they will definitely get out. People were amazed to see that they had literally fallen out of the wall, and each had the title of Discoverer of the Aerial Fortress. The people realized that those who had passed the Ice Palace first had already appeared. The name of these pioneers is the She family. The crowd surrounded Sia and her team. They wanted to know the details. Khan stood in his bathroom at home in front of the mirror. He didn't know what to do now. She told her friends that they wouldn't be able to calmly discuss the quest in such an environment. Loki suggested that they meet in real life and discuss everything without this crowd. Irene warmly supported him, but Khan was against it. He didn't want to be recognized. He was a superhero in the game, but if his friends saw him, a pathetic loser, in real life, they would be very disappointed. A game nun named Terry appeared, collecting and distributing the most important news from Arpedia online. A girl named Pan joined the chat. They discussed the news that had excited all the forum participants yesterday. They interrupted each other and reported that a new territory had suddenly appeared. It was the Fallen Air Tower. According to eyewitnesses, the air fortress is connected to the Ice Palace that was recently discovered in Nosaka. How they are connected and whether it has anything to do with Deborah, no one knows yet. But everyone was eager to find out. There are already those who have passed through the Ice Palace and received the title of its discoverers. And information about each of the members of the Guild of Sia appeared on the forum. This is exactly the case when popularity did not add joy. Real people Irene, Sia, and Loki were sitting in a cafe and discussing the news. They got themselves into trouble, and they were temporarily banned from entering the game. They were getting too much attention because they opened a new dungeon and a new area, and now people would be chasing them to get information. Irene, in the worldly realm, Yuka, said that she would lead them straight to the lair of Medusa and let them learn their lesson there. Everyone was there except Zeke. Zeke entered the cafe. He apologized for being late. They looked at each other, and each of them thought that in real life Zeke was not at all like his heroic character. In the game, the blacksmith was puny, and the guy named Han was athletic and pumped up. Since he started going to the gym, his body has really changed. But he didn't expect it to be so noticeable. The red-haired girl urged them to quickly introduce themselves and said that her name was Yu Ha and that she was in the 11th grade of high school and came to the game right after Chai Rin. The guy's name was Kim Jun-soo. He was 25 years old and a fourth-year law student at the university, and he and Sia were in the same university club. Jae-soon went to the same gym with Han. The martial arts hall belonged to the Chae-rin family. Chae-rin was surprised that Zeke also went to her dad's gym. She was shocked by how small the world was. He nodded his head. The guy introduced himself as Kang Yu-han. She couldn't believe her ears that it was her childhood friend, the eldest son of the supermarket owner. It turned out that they were friends since childhood. And Jae-hoon knew this, but he didn't say anything. Sia said he always seemed familiar to her, but she couldn't remember where she had seen him. She extended her hand to Khan. He shook it shyly. Irene said that it was enough to be nostalgic, and it was time to discuss the quest. After all, that was exactly why they had gathered. They left the cafe a few hours later and began to say goodbye. Chae-rin asked for Yuhan's phone number. Irene laughed at her that a girl can't ask a guy for his number first. Others asked for his number, too. Khan was a very introverted guy, so his phone book only included family members. This kind of attention embarrassed him. He wanted to talk to Sia again, but he didn't dare, because they had agreed to call each other after completing the quest. He received a call from an unknown number. He answered. The person on the other end of the line called him by the name Bartz. Zeke now! Khan asked who the man was talking to him was, and how he knew the names of his game characters. The voice answered that the one calling was the one who deleted his Bartz. He continued with false sympathy that he now had to re-level the character. Khan was furiously shouting that the idiot had hacked his account and now dared to mock him. He was shouting so loudly that passers-by turned around to look at him. Khan asked what he wanted from him and why he did it. The voice asked him not to be so angry, because in the game, he was very friendly with him. Khan was shocked that they met inside Arpedia. He asked the bastard to tell him his name, but he said that he didn't call to argue. The voice was asking for a bet. He continued that he was playing Arpedia. He was playing to get rid of all the hacked items, and while he was dealing with them, they would play hide-and-seek. And if Khan manages to figure him out and catch him in the game, then he will return Bartz to him. The voice asked if Khan liked his idea. He said that he was an advanced hacker, and it would not be difficult to return one account. Khan asked what would happen if he didn't catch him. He said that he would remove his blacksmith too. Khan agreed and said that when he found him, he would kill him. The phone rang briefly and Khan shouted words of hatred, scaring the passers-by. Khan went to the cybersecurity department. They advised him to drop the case since he couldn't track it down, and that the hacker was acting very carefully and cunningly. Khan knew that he couldn't count on them, but it was worth a try. He started remembering all the characters he had encountered in the game. It could have been anyone. He told himself to pull himself together and not to suspect people without having evidence. Khan decided to stick to his plan. Khan decided to raise the reputation of the blacksmith and track the route of movement and sale of weapons. Meanwhile, in the game, the blacksmith Zeke brought the gnome 30 hearts of new tree soldiers. Now it was the gnome's turn to teach Zeke how to disassemble objects. The dwarf replied that he could not wait for his return to complete his work on Max Dragon. He wanted to check right away if they were suitable. But Zeke grabbed him by the shoulder and reminded him that the dwarf had promised to take him on as an apprentice, and that he shouldn't even try to freeze. The gnome said that he had already forgotten a little and crawled on all fours into some corner. He fished out a book and a couple of tools and handed them to Zeke. Zeke asked what he had given him. The dwarf said that this is the training kit of the blacksmith galley and the manual for them. This book contains all the basics of craftsmanship. You need to read it carefully and work on it. The gnome added that if there were not enough consumables, he could give more. With these words, the gnome grabbed the bag of hearts and ran to the basement. Zeke thought that the gnome was a real bugger, and this setup could in no way be called training, and he sat down at the table to study the manual. Zeke started looking through Galley's training journal. There was a section on precision assembly of objects. He was literally hooked into reading the book, especially the precision assembly skills section. In the new quest, Zeke was given the task of restarting the fortress's air reactor, which required him to make broken parts. This information was just needed to make the parts. He wanted to learn all the techniques that were written in the book. And if everything was just fine with the theoretical part, then in practice, nothing worked out for him. Even using the skill of understanding the structure of the material did not help to disassemble the iron board carefully, because it was very fragile. Zeke was very upset. The book said that disassembly required damage, but the item's durability was very low. If disassembly didn't work, it was scary to think about precise assembly. Zeke was on the verge of sending everything to hell, but he remembered his phone conversation with the hacker and decided that he would never give up and would try until he succeeded. Meanwhile, the merchant Lizzie was sitting in the tavern, drowning her failure in alcohol. She blamed it on the blacksmith Zeke. Damn him. Lizzie thought that she should have stuck to Sia's group and followed them. She also wanted to get gold and the quests of the ancient city. Lizzie thought that crazy Zeke always smelled of money. Suddenly, she heard the animated voices of the visitors. Lizzie already thought that they noticed that someone was leaving the game and giving away their items. But it turned out that they did not. People were excitedly shouting that a dragon had appeared in the city center. After many attempts, he finally succeeded. The system reported that he had mastered the skill of disassembly with an increase in rank, and now material losses would be reduced. Zeke started making gears, and the system reported that he had assembled a clock mechanism. Finally, he managed to collect everything. He turned on the camera mode and decided to capture everything around him. An eagle soared smoothly in the blue sky. Lord Dillon watched him with interest. He couldn't understand what it was. He thought he would like to join in too, but he was very busy right now. He needed to find the blacksmith Zeke. This Zeke ordered so much hardware, and now he doesn't respond to messages. Suddenly, Dillon seemed to melt, and the system reported that Dillon was dead. And the amazed gnomes watched as a mechanical dragon descended from the sky towards them. Lizzie was there too. She thought that people were dying because of the dragon that suddenly appeared, but she somehow ended up alive, and the merchant thought that she was incredibly lucky. She looked at the items of dead people and decided to collect them all and resell them. Some of the items were even epic, she told herself with delight, that you can't even get something like that at auctions. She even found a unicorn robe. She decided to go to Nosark. It was the right decision. She stood right in front of the dragon, and he looked at her with his burning eyes. Suddenly the dragon roared, flames burst out of it, and it exploded before Lizzie's eyes. The dragon's engine failed to withstand the overload, as the dwarf who created it had predicted. The Nosarka court heard the case. Zeke shouted that he was protesting. The blacksmith assured the judge that he had nothing to do with the piece of iron that destroyed the village. Zeke said that he was a tourist and had come to Nosark on an excursion. The gnome also claimed that this guy was not his colleague. Zeke couldn't believe that Gally the dwarf actually wanted to be let go. Gally continued in his fervor that this monkey-like guy couldn't possibly be his colleague, just an errand boy. And Gally didn't trust him from the very beginning. And anyway, if it weren't for him, Max Dragon would be perfectly fine. Zeke, in a rage, rushed at this bearded fly agaric, and a fight broke out between them right in the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel and called for silence. He asked if Gally admitted that he had created the Dragon Mac by combining with a human, and that they had caused great damage to Nosark. Gally said that this was generally minor damage, but if they had accepted his proposal for joint development, there would have been no damage. The gnomes screamed that the Union itself was to blame for everything. But everyone managed to see what a grandiose dragon the gnome Gally had created. He remembered that when he presented his project, everyone laughed at him. They told him then that this dragon would not be able to crawl, let alone fly, but the dragon did fly anyway. Gally excitedly told the judge that despite the limited materials and terrible working conditions, he had done it. and that if instead of ridicule he had been helped, everything would have been fine. Zeke listened to Gallia's accusations against the Union and decided that he had gone crazy because his life project was being destroyed. And if that idiot Gallia didn't shut up, they would both get life in prison. Our hero understood that he was so weak in Zeke's body that he wouldn't be able to escape from prison. It would be better to be killed with the possibility of resurrection than to be sentenced to life. But still, Zeke understood that Galli's words had some sense. After all, just the breath of this dragon had broken the Great Wall. And that was exactly what it was built for, to hold back the dragon's fire. And that meant that if the dragon had been made properly, it might have been able to defeat Andurus. The judge slammed his gavel and called for silence in the courtroom. The judge took into account all of Galli's arguments and found him not guilty of the incident. However, their actions caused great damage to Nosark. The court ordered that they be provided with all the necessary materials, and within a month they must create a weapon that could defeat Andurus. The judge continued that if they failed to do so, then the dwarf Galli and the human Zeke would be sentenced to life imprisonment. They were stunned by the court's decision. Zeke's plans at all to share responsibility with Galli. Both left the courthouse. He scolded the dwarf for talking all this nonsense in court, and that because of him, he would have to rot in prison for the rest of his days. But Galli told the man not to worry about trifles, and that he had a reason for saying all this. Zeke felt that this fly agaric had some kind of plan. The gnome put his hand on his shoulder and said that our hero had to go to the fiery mountain. Zeke couldn't believe his ears. Galli explained that it might seem like Mac's dragon had gone wild because it was giving off too much energy. But in fact, it was the other way around. And he went on to explain at length why the dragon had broken down. Zeke wanted to run away, but Galli grabbed him by the shoulder and got to the point. The blacksmith said that he was running away from this inventor and that he had somewhere to go. The dwarf said that he would not leave his friend without a reward. For the successful completion of the task, Galli promised a glove that he personally designed. With this glove, you can create steel wire that never breaks due to its special properties. In addition to the glove, the dwarf promised to share with him the secret knowledge of the dwarves as a reward. This was already tempting, and Zeke asked what he needed to do on the fiery mountain. The dwarf liked this accommodating man. Galli said that the task was not particularly difficult. Zeke had to go to the fiery mountain and get the dragon's heart. Zeke asked if the dwarf wanted too much. The quest required Zeke to obtain a dragon's heart so that Mac's dragon would have enough power. The dragon's heart is the source of the dragon's life and the source of the mage's energy. Zeke already knew from the release of Bartsum that this is a very rare item that can be obtained by hunting a dragon. But the success rate of such a hunt is 1%. Or you can find the place that the dragon has designated for its death. Galli told him that he had once heard something in the elf village. A dragon who was friends with the elf chieftain had gone to the fiery mountain to pass away. Galli was sure that the dragon's heart could be found somewhere there. Zeke understood that these were just rumors, and he had to go so far only based on unreliable information. What nonsense! But the issue was not at all about the distance. The minimum level for this task is 80, which he didn't have. There were super cool monsters and sulfur gas aromas and hot lava. But in the game, unlike in real life, Zeke was a very risky guy and decided that he would try. And if it didn't work out, he would just run away. For the journey, Galli provided him with a hot air balloon. On the road, in order not to waste time, he practiced precision assembly according to Galli's book. Suddenly, the basket tilted sharply. Zeke dropped the part from his hands and cursed. He leaned out of the basket to see what was happening, when he literally recoiled in horror. Zeke saw the face of the merchant Lizzie right in front of him. He had no choice but to drag her into the basket, although he really wanted to just throw her off. He asked the swindler what she wanted from him again. He said that because of her, he almost crashed. He told her to get off his vehicle immediately, or he would throw her down without any regrets. Lizzie grabbed his hand and said that she would never let go of him now. She said that he had to stop skimming the cream without her, and she said that she had been following him and knew that he was flying to fulfill the quest of the air fortress, and that he wanted to scoop up all the treasures and untold riches alone. He thought that this bitch should have been strangled during the expedition. After 3 days of flying, they reached the fire mountain. Lizzie tried to joke that they got there quickly. She was scared in this place, and she started whining. And Zeke told her to go to hell because he had a lot of things to do. She screamed that she wouldn't leave him alone and that he would have to share his treasures with her. The flame mountain smelled terribly, and there were also level 80 scorpions here. There was one right behind them. It was a scorpion soldier that lives under the volcanic zone, an insectoid monster with no intelligence. Lizzie screamed in horror. She was indignant that she was just a tradeswoman, but she was constantly getting into dangerous adventures, and how stupid it was of her to tag along with the blacksmith. Zeke told her that greed would one day destroy her, and that he was simply powerless here, because he was not his level, and he was a craftsman, not a warrior. Zeke looked around and saw that there was only one scorpion here. He took out his sword in the hope that he could somehow deal with one. But his attack did not bring any success, and only angered the giant insect. He told Lizzie that now they were definitely lost, and that it was no use hanging around with men. It served her right. He begged the scorpion to let them live, and she screamed at him to stop mumbling and fight for their lives. Suddenly, the scorpion roared. Zeke saw that either an arrow or a spear had pierced its claw. Scorpio was struck by an equally unusual creature. It was a hybrid of a lizard and a human, a level 58 creature, a reptile human with the intelligence of a baby. They ended up in a settlement of these lizard men. Lizzie began to thank this reptilian, and Zeke said that he could not even imagine that he would ever meet such a person. He really hoped that the reptilians understood human speech. Although our hero was no less scared than with the scorpion, he waved his hand in greeting. But the reptilians were not moved by their flattering speeches, and they twisted the aliens and tied them with a rope. They dragged them to their leader. He said that since humans dared to enter their territory, they would sacrifice them. The leader was level 72 and was larger and stronger than ordinary lizards. They were both tied to long sticks and carried like partridges to the place of sacrifice. Zeke was screaming for them to be untied immediately, and that they meant them no harm. He had never actually met a reptilian before, so he didn't know what to expect from them. They began to be lowered by ropes into the fiery crater. It became increasingly unbearably hot. Zeke asked Lizzie if she had any magical trinket like that ring. She thought that she was already tired of this stupid game and she wanted to go home. Zeke asked those reptilian freaks what they were doing, because they had saved them from the scorpion for some reason. They said they had saved them for sacrifice. Zeke tried to get through to their dumb brains that this was a terrible mistake, and that he and Lizzie could still be useful to them. But it was all in vain. They were almost at the lava. The lizards ordered to be quiet and to sacrifice themselves with dignity. But then someone shouted loudly for them to stop and lift the people back up. It was the leader of the lizard tribe, who was level 57. The chieftain declared that these people were messengers of the Great Spirit. The rescued Zeke and Lizzie were telling these reptilians from behind the leader's back that they had warned them. The lizards were clearly unhappy with this turn of events, but the chief calmed his subordinates, saying that the Great Spirit had addressed him and said that he needed to get help from people. But the lizard warriors insisted that they didn't need any help from people because they were lizards, and they were on their own. But Zeke said that they weren't strong and they won only by numbers. The leader of the lizard warriors turned to the chieftain with a reproach that he allowed people to offend them. The leader, in order to calm down passions, ordered the great envoys to be taken to prison for now. Zeke thought that these stupid lizards had had enough. No respect for the messengers of the spirit. They were placed in a strong cage, and from there they screamed so loudly that their cries could be heard far beyond the fiery mountain. Meanwhile, the head of the warriors was telling the chief that this was against the rules and that all invaders without exception had to be gotten rid of, and that the Great Spirit himself had created such rules. But the chief said that the Great Spirit had told them to get help from people, and that with their strength alone, they would not be able to resist the power of the shamans. The warrior agreed that the chief was right. They really did have few warriors. But he categorically did not like these two, and it seemed that they could not be of any use. But nevertheless, the Great Spirit never makes mistakes, and therefore we must let these people go. While the chief and the senior warrior were having this conversation, Zeke decided to use his skills in understanding the structure to find a weak spot in the cage and destroy it. It was easier than he thought. He just kicked the right spot as hard as he could, and the cage collapsed. They were free. Lizzie told him not to play the superhero. The leader of the warriors, who returned to release them, saw that they had climbed out of the cage themselves. They thought that now he would call the warriors again, and that they were in trouble again. The blacksmith shouted at Lizzie to run as fast as she could. The lizard shouted for them to stop. He shouted that he had something very important to tell them, but they did not listen and continued to run away. Zeke shouted at him that if he were in their place, he wouldn't stop either. He thought he hated people because they were naughty, not like lizards. They ran and ran forward, but instead of getting out into freedom, they ran into the guards. The guards blocked their way, and there was nowhere to run. There was nowhere else to run. All the passages and exits were blocked. The leader ordered everyone to stand still and said that he needed to talk to the people. But Zeke didn't trust these reptiles. He was afraid that they would be caught and put into that lava pit. And he decided to use a pickaxe to change the situation. And if there is no road, then you need to cut one for yourself. And he began to intensively hammer the wall with a pickaxe. The lizard screamed at him to stop, and that he couldn't chop there. But the blacksmith had already cut through the wall. There were strange people standing outside, and one of them, in a hood, said that he had found it, and that was easy to find thanks to the collapsed wall in the cave. The second one answered that it was not for nothing that clairvoyance was a hidden skill of level 5. He called on those behind them to go forward, and they obeyed the order they received. Zeke and Lizzie ran towards the passage in the collapsed wall, the lizards running after them. The leader shouted that the people themselves don't know what they've done. Zeke joked that he just cut a window in their house to get some air. The leader of the warriors said that because they did not listen to him, the situation had worsened. Lizzie wanted to snap back, but she heard a cry that there was a threat behind her. Some kind of fireball was rolling towards them. This giant flame was started by the invaders. The leader of the soldiers ordered to capture the invaders. But the invaders themselves came here with the aim of hunting giant lizards. Their leader ordered to kill all the lizards. Zeke looked at this carnage and did not understand where so many people came from. Many of the attackers were of a higher level than was necessary to pass such a mountain. Their leader was called Warrior Yuna, and he was level 92, and his companion Sonkamag was level 90. The warrior chief roared that the humans had come for their souls again, but the lizards would fight. He ordered the warriors to guard their shelter. Zeke realized that he was talking complete nonsense in the heat of the moment, because the forces were clearly unequal, and the best way out for the lizards now was to flee. He shouted to the lizards to run away as fast as they could. Zeke advised them to run to the Sarin Desert. Yuna shouted at the vile reptiles not to try to escape. The chief asked the man to stop. The invaders called out for Lady Yuna in unison, but she didn't hear anything in such a combat state. She put her sword to the chest of the warrior leader. She demanded that the lizard come to its senses and ask for forgiveness for its rudeness before dying. But the warrior said he wouldn't do it, and let him kill if he wants to. She smirked and told him not to even expect to die an easy death. Yuna wanted to keep him alive and torture him. She pointed her sword and said that she would first gouge out his eye. Suddenly, Yuna heard a menacing shout that it was enough to mock the reptile. Yuna was literally stunned that someone dared to say such a thing to her. The girl with the bow said harshly that the quest task did not include torturing lizards. Yuna got angry that she didn't dare tell her what to do. The archer said that reminded her of the game rules. Yuna told the archer that she only had 3 options: shut up, pay up, or fight her one-on-one. The reptilian, meanwhile, took advantage of the situation and bit Yuna hard on the leg. Yuna howled in pain and grabbed her leg with both hands, and the warrior leader stood up and ran away. Yuna vowed to get this vile lizard out from under the ground. She turned to the archer who had interrupted the massacre. Their conversation was not over. Meanwhile, those who had escaped from the invaders were sitting in a cave in the Saran Desert. By the fire sat the blacksmith Zeke, Lizzie, the leader of the reptilian tribe, and the main warrior. The warrior woke up and asked what had happened to them and where they were. The chief was glad that he had come to his senses and said that he was just about to explain everything to the people. Zeke said he didn't know all the details, but he felt like it was all because of him. He began to apologize for not being able to control his emotions and breaking the wall in the cave, which resulted in the death of almost all the lizard warriors. The chief warrior jumped up and, with an angry glare, said that he would not be able to get off with a simple apology. Kuznets said he was very saddened by the tragic death of several hundred reptilians. The chief warrior said that death follows the fight and nothing can be done about it. The main problem is this disclosure of the location of the cave. Because of Zeke, the lizards couldn't protect their heritage. And there's only one person to blame for all of this, and it would have been better to sacrifice them right away, as they intended. The lizard said that the honor of lizards does not lie in their lives. But then, the chief of the tribe intervened, gently asking the senior warrior to moderate his anger. He asked everyone to listen to him. The chieftain said that since ancient times their tribe had been guarding the dragon's legacy. Flame Mountain is where the great dragon Hades is buried, and the lizards have protected his legacy for over 100 years. Blacksmith Zeke asked if they were talking about the dragon's heart. He was already glad that he found it. Yuna gave money to her group for successfully exterminating the lizards. Everyone was asking each other if this was the end of the quest, and suddenly they heard a voice that no, it was not the end. It was said by a shaman lizard, a special kind of lizard that can use magic and witchcraft. In the cave, the lizard leader had just begun telling the story of the lizard shaman. Everything went wrong from the moment she betrayed her tribe. This lizard was different from everyone else from its very childhood. It had a leadership mindset and human eloquence. In addition to this, she knew how to use magic. She had no shortcomings. Therefore, the chief of the tribe gave her the name Lizard Shaman. She lived up to his expectations and was able to revive the tribe. She became like a spiritual leader. But at some point, she began to change. It is unknown what books she read, but she suddenly became obsessed with taking possession of the power of the dragon's heart. Using this power, she wanted to subjugate the entire tribe. The leader ordered to punish the shaman for her pride and lust for power. She was brought by force to the chief. He told her that he trusted her and could not imagine that she, because of her greed, wanted to steal the heritage of the Great Spirit. The chief told her that this thing cannot be treated like that the dragon's heart is a power created to protect the fiery mountain. The leader asked her a direct question about the reasons for her desire to destroy their abode, but the shaman was able to escape from them using her witchcraft. Zeke and Lizzie listened with bated breath. The chieftain continued his story. And since then, the escaped shaman never stopped hunting for the dragon's heart. She used people to attack. The chief said that the shaman wanted not only to take possession of the dragon's heart, but also to destroy the tribe in which she was born and raised. The chief desperately resisted this, because if the dragon's heart were to disappear, then a great disaster would happen to the flaming mountain. Zik asked for clarification. The dwarves needed the dragon's heart, but the blacksmith himself did not want to cause trouble. The chieftain said that if even one legacy from the Flame Mountain were to disappear, the mountain would explode due to the enormous volcanic force that this legacy suppressed. The chieftain said that everything was fine for now because he had hidden the dragon's heart in the lava inside the mountain, and the shaman would not be able to do anything for a while. But once a month, the lizard men perform a special ritual to fill the dragon's heart with power. There is only 1 week left until the next ritual, and during this time the invaders will definitely come here. The shaman promised the people twice as much money so that they would wait until the lizards gathered for their ritual. People decided that this shaman was incredibly rich. Yuna said that her people agreed to guard the cave in exchange for a generous reward. The lizard chieftain ended his story by saying that if the dragon's heart is not filled with power during this time, the fiery mountain will explode. Zeke thought about what he had heard and realized that the situation was bad on all sides. The Lizardmen tribe were gathering in the desert. Zeke said he would help them. Lizzie said he was crazy. She said that there were a lot of those people and they were well armed. Zeke's nerves with her whining and her presence in general. She told him to return the balloon and she would get the hell out of here. Suddenly, they noticed some majestic and, judging by its appearance, very ancient sculpture. Zeke gasped in admiration. He always admired great skill. It was the Steel Sphinx, a huge statue that guarded the entrance to the pyramid dungeon of another world. Zeke had a plan. Meanwhile, in the city, the members of Sia's group were asking each other how things were going with the quests. Irene wrote that she reached Romney, but could not find holy water. Loki wrote that it was so-so. Irene asked how Sia herself was doing. She replied that she did not even know what to say. Only Zeke did not respond to the correspondence. Sia thought that he might be asleep. But Zeke was pumping up his skills and succeeded in disassembling. He received a firm iron hand. The lizards brought him their broken armor and he trained on them. And he reached level 10 in disassembly mastery. Zeke thought he would have to stay up all night to finish everything. He shouted to the lizards not to relax and to carry the materials faster. And they were dragging materials. The elder warrior said that they were starting to get annoyed because what he was making them do was pointless. Lizards needed training, Zeke chuckled, which is why nothing works for them. He asked the senior warrior if he knew why they lost to the humans. He retorted that the fight was not over yet, and that was why they did not lose. Zeke said that even though they had a lot of stuff, the reason they lost was because their weapons were useless. The blacksmith said that with such a lousy weapon the lizards will never win, and he will try to upgrade their junk to A class, so they are incredibly lucky, you could say. The lizard said that he inherited this weapon from his dad, and he treasures it very much. Zeke deliberately broke the weapon and began to apologize. The lizard frowned, but said that it was just a weapon. Zeke told him not to be sad, and he would fix his dad's weapon in a jiffy. He said he would make it even better and more beautiful, and he set to work. And he made a new axe! The lizard said that this is not a repair, and the thing looks very strange, and in general the old one was much more familiar and better. While Zeke was busy fixing his weapons, Lizzie was back to her old ways. She had been playing Arpedia for a year now, and had a keen eye. She looked at the pendant on the chieftain's neck, and assumed that it was very expensive and valuable. The swindler wanted to trick the reptile into giving it to her. She threw herself on the reptilian's neck and said that she was his granddaughter and that she finally recognized him. She showed him some object and asked if he liked it, and she offered to exchange it for a pendant. Grandpa politely declined, because the pendant was personally given to him by the greatest dragon, Hedias. Lizzie figured that this fact made it much more expensive, and she began to offer the chieftain her various little things. But he said that he would not exchange his pendant for anything. But to somehow console her, I am ready to give her something. And I got out an unusual flower, Lizzie gasped, because it was a desert rose. It is used to create high-level magic stones. Meanwhile, the people in the cave were dying of boredom while waiting for the lizards. Yuna even howled. She was already tired of waiting for these brainless reptiles to appear, and everyone else was getting very tired from waiting. One of the people said to himself with irritation that this hysterical Yuna had had enough. The man's name was Han Song, and he wanted to go out for some fresh air so as not to go crazy. And he climbed out of the cave. He looked around and suddenly noticed a woman. He remembered that he knew her. He called out to her and asked if she was the one who had run away with the lizard man. But she was so busy looking for the desert rose in the sand that she ignored his question. He took his sword out of its sheath and pointed it straight at Lizzie's forehead, asking if she knew where the lizards were hiding. He promised that if she told, he would spare her. She looked up in surprise. What kind of mustachioed and bearded villain was this that was preventing her from building a business? Han Song advised not to provoke him, otherwise he wouldn't be able to vouch for himself. Dude said Lizzie was messing with the wrong guy, and he was way cooler. But then Zeke showed up and used weapon destruction. He started scolding her for running away without warning. He didn't mince words and said that she had lost all fear and that he was tired of sorting out her problems. Han Sung told her that she should have just said she had a boyfriend. They were arguing like married people. But he would eradicate this harmful relationship now. And he pulled out 2 swords at once. Han Sung's level was as high as 80, and he had never been in a relationship, so he hated women and couples in love. Zeke asked what kind of guy she had picked up and why he was so nervous. The blacksmith clarified whether the impudent fellow really wanted to give him a thrashing, and that it was not too late to change his mind. Han Sung said that it was not his place to say such things, and he would teach them both a lesson now. As he waved his sword in front of Zeke and Lizzie's noses, the lizards appeared. The shamanka breathed a sigh of relief that they had finally arrived and ordered the invaders to get ready. She reported that an army of lizard men was approaching. Zeke drew his sword and went towards Han Sun. He declared war. The girl magician said that she saw an army coming. Yuna said that she knows without any magic. She belligerently shouted that they would now give the lizards a second dressing down. She ordered the mages to begin the attack. The mages summoned the mega flame and directed it at the lizards. They were delighted at how beautifully it turned out and called on us to go and finish off the rest. But when the smoke cleared, they saw that the lizards were standing there safe and sound, and in brand new armor that looked impressive even from a distance. The mages didn't understand what had happened and how the enemy had managed to survive. After all, they had used a 5-hit mega flame attack. Zeke made amazing armor for the lizards by mixing the slime of the magic slime. This slime had a particularly strong magical defense. Zeke thought that it was worth spending so much time looking for this slime. Lizzie, as always, was pestering me to sell it, or better yet, give it to her. And now he stood there, incredibly proud of his work, with an army standing behind him. The people from Yuna's team didn't understand what was wrong with this guy and why he was fighting on the lizard's side. One of the people said that he knew the guy. He is a famous gambler in Bolden, and his name is Fix-It King Zeke. Everyone started laughing that this craftsman had such a stupid name, and they had already thought that he was a prankster. Zeke didn't like being called pathetic and ordered the fight to begin. He promised to turn all their fucking weapons into dust. The people moved towards the army of lizards. But they stood rooted to the spot, and only then did people discover that the lizards were wearing armor that they had never worn. Someone shouted for people to be more careful, and that the lizards had upgraded their weapons and become much stronger. It was incredible to imagine the mobs changing their equipment and returning to battle. The people used the magical hyperstrike again, but some of them were broken and suggested running as fast as possible and abandoning the quest even at the cost of reputation. Yuna shouted to her group not to even think about giving up, because they were just pathetic lizards. She encouraged them by saying that all they needed was a left hook, a right hook, and everything would be okay. But people were wrong to think that the lizards had simply changed their clothes and returned to fight. Their armor was unusually strong, and their weapons were very powerful. The lizards demanded their cave back. Yuna also fought with the lizard and felt that the situation was serious. They became not just stronger and faster. It wasn't just these 2 factors. The main thing is that their weapons have become lighter. But no matter how much the equipment improves, the mob always remains a mob. Yuna used a blood rage attack, a warrior skill that uses all stamina except 10% of max health and increases attack power and speed. She screamed that creatures like these lizards should die. She decided that she would crush the lizard warrior now. But the warrior chief stood as unbreakable as a rock. Zeke saw with horror that he had not put on his new armor. But the chief warrior believed that armor was not important, and that a strong body was the best defense. Zeke assured him that the advantage of this armor was that it was light and strong. Zeke assured him that he was being stubborn in vain, because he used all his skills and specially made special armor for the lizards, which gives them another chance at life. The elder warrior said that there was nothing wrong with falling in battle, but Zeke thought that was an old-fashioned opinion. Zeke then said, "That isn't the reason a senior warrior wants to protect the legacy, primarily to protect the lives of all members of the tribe? And why then does the warrior leader speak so disdainfully of his own life?" Then he agreed that the man was right in this, and that the lives of comrades are most important, because they are the future of the tribe. The equipment did its job, and the elder warrior was ready to defend his tribe. Yuna died in battle with the leader of the warriors. Zeke watched the battle and was glad that everything was going according to plan and was going great. His plan was to make the lizards stronger, start a battle, and then steal the dragon's heart while he was at it. But now he knew that if the dragon's heart was extracted from the fiery lava, an eruption would occur. He himself had taught the lizards to value life, but he himself had forgotten what was truly important. And what was most important to Zeke was the quest, and not the free equipment manufacturing. He decided that he would simply need to evacuate everyone before the eruption began. While everyone was busy fighting, no one cared about Zeke. So now was the time to get the dragon's heart. Suddenly, an arrow hit Zeke in the leg. It was very painful, and the blacksmith was forced to stop. He rolled around in pain in the cave. Zeke wondered where such an arrow came from. At first, he thought it was a shaman attack, but the shaman uses magic. The blacksmith realized that he was under attack by one of the players. The shooter was very skilled. He aimed at the joints and blocked the movement. Many of the lizards were hit and lay on the ground. It was unclear why the shooter was doing this. He could have just killed, and that was it. With his control over the weapon, Zeke took his pick and started to hammer away at the wall. He didn't really care what the player's goal was. In any case, he needed to move towards his own goal. He eventually broke through the wall and got out. After the wall collapsed, there was a lot of dust in the air. It was a kind of protection. In order to successfully shoot an arrow, good visibility is needed. He himself set up an ambush for the archer, and the archer was caught. The two were amazed beyond measure. They looked at each other. This shooter was Sia. Everyone was wondering what he was doing there. After all, they had their own coalition, the Sia Guild. Meanwhile, while the battle was going on, the old leader of the lizard tribe remained in the cave with Lizzie. Lizzie lay by the fire and thought about what was going on with Zeke, and how the war between the lizards and the invaders was going. The chief reassured her that Zeke had made equipment for all the lizards, and that they should be fine. Lizzie replied that she had no idea Zeke was so skilled. The chief said he didn't even know how to thank them for taking care of the tribe. Lizzie replied that not with words, but with deeds. She was hinting again at the coveted pendant. The chief hinted that he had already given them so much. Lizzie had indeed already wheedled many valuable things out of the chief, but she countered that he had not given the main thing. But the leader flatly refused to give it up, because this pendant is a gift that a great soul gave him when she was still alive. And if this pendant falls into the hands of a stranger, then there will be a big trouble. Because if this necklace is untied, then he will no longer be able to control the lizard men. Suddenly, someone snuck up behind the leader, and he tore the pendant from the leader's neck. It was the lizard shaman. She told the chief that he would not be able to deceive her as he had everyone else. She stated that this time she had divorced him herself. The shamanka said that from the very beginning her goal was to stay alive together with the chief, because the chief always hid behind the army and did not show his face. The chief was frightened and did not expect to see a shaman here in the shelter. This pendant was actually a pendant of soul and spirit. It was a convenient object to talk to spirits, but this thing was also dangerous because it could be used to brainwash, especially if you use it on creatures with low intelligence, like lizard men. which is what actually happened. The leader began to shout and call for help. The shaman said that screaming was useless because she had put all his servants to sleep. She told the chief that she did not think that he would send most of the army to the mountain because, in fact, the shamanka's goal was precisely this place. The chief wanted to find out from the shaman the reason why she was persecuting him. The shamanka was surprised that he was now asking her about the reasons. She chuckled that there was no point in asking about something he already knew. It was all about those stupid rules that the leader came up with and imposed on the tribe. It was about her family and her child. The shaman said that she intended to put an end to all this. An end to these stupid games of tribe, sacrifices, and fights for this. Then Lizzie came running, screaming, and stood between the shaman and the leader. Lizzie asked the shaman to stop torturing the old man. Meanwhile, Zeke and Sia, who had met, asked each other what they were doing here, in this unusual place. Zeke replied that he was doing his part of the quest. Sia said that she was also here on her part of the quest. The blacksmith asked what kind of quest Sia was currently on. Everyone wanted the other to tell about their quests first, and even got into a little fight over it. Sia said that she was on a quest to reconstruct the Mycenaean air fortress. In order to restore the aerial fortress of Mycenae, the wings of the wind, which are in the land of the elves, are needed. The leader of the elves was named Harundel. He wondered if it was the wings of the wind that had brought them to their land. Sia fell to her knees in front of him and said that she really needed them, and asked him to help her get them. Harundel said he was very sorry that she had come such a long way, but the wings of the wind were kept in the spirit world. Sia asked for advice on what was needed to get there. The leader of the elves said that a person cannot get into the spirit world in any way, no matter what kind of transport. The wings of the wind in the spirit world was guarded by a midnight crab. Sia was surprised that the crab had such a high level. The elf said that it was as if they were speaking different languages. He explained to Sia that a person cannot get there because he does not understand the language of spirits, and that if he gets lost in the world of spirits, he will never be able to get out. Sia wondered what she should do now, because she still needed wings. The elf noted that he didn't say there were no other ways. He told how, long ago, the ancestor of the elves gave Mr. Heddes a pendant. This is a pendant of the soul and spirit that can hear spirits. And in order to go to the spirit world, you need to get the pendant, which is in the area of the fiery mountain. Meanwhile, in the village of Altun, on the western outskirts of the Principality of Kiev, Sia wondered if the pendant was there. She dug around in this fiery mountain for several days, but still didn't find any pendant. A hooded lizard shaman approached Sia and asked what pendant she was looking for. Sia was glad she was on the trail and begged him to tell her where the pendant was and how she could get it. The shaman said that the road to the pendant is not so simple. The blacksmith asked Sia if the shaman was really the one who approached her first, and she confirmed it. The shaman must have heard that someone was looking for the pendant. And then, in the opening of the wall that Zeke had broken through with his pickaxe, a lizard with an axe appeared. He screamed that it was the last man who hit Sia with an axe. It was the leader of the warriors whose goal was to kill all the people and take back the cave. Zeke rushed to help his friend. He shouted at the warrior not to kill his friend, but he said that she was a minion of the leader of the invaders. The senior warrior cried out in despair that Zeke had betrayed them, but he said that he had betrayed no one. The blacksmith said that he himself is now trying to understand what is happening here, and asked the lizard not to rush to conclusions and not to finish off Sia. But the lizard was adamant and said to choose immediately who he was with. No options. Zik had a difficult choice to make. If he died now, there was a high probability that the quest would fail. Sia's defense and try to fight the lizard. He knew that they were not that strong in a single battle, and if you use the destruction skill in battle, then there is some chance of winning. He hesitated, and the lizards waited. The warrior chief told him that he understood that the life of an ally was important, and that Zeke is their ally too. He asked him to move away from Sia. Zeke took a step back, but then he said that he had no choice, because Sia was also his ally. just like the lizards, and that she ended up here by accident, and he didn't know anything about it before. The lizard growled that even if that were true, the blood of their warriors was still on this woman's hands. Zeke snapped that he wouldn't fight them, but he wouldn't give up Sia either. At this point, Sia touched Zeke on the shoulder and said that everything was okay, and there was no need to fight because there was no reason to fight. She made a very important statement. Sia said that all of them, including Zeke, are being led by the nose by the leader of the Lizard Men tribe. This lunatic has been deceiving everyone for many years. Meanwhile, dramatic events were unfolding in the cave. The shaman asked Lizzie what made her protect the chief. Lizzie said that they had only known each other for a short time, but they had a good relationship, that he was a kind grandfather and gave her lots of presents. The shaman said that she doesn't know enough about him to understand what kind of vile creature he is. Lizzie looked at the shaman and did not believe her words. Lizzie was quite the thing. Here she finally came across a real sucker, a real gold mine, and she didn't want to lose him. And she didn't give a damn about all this squabble between the lizards. She said that she would not leave her grandfather to die because he had made her rich for the rest of her life. The shaman ordered her to stop clowning around, and that if Lizzie didn't move away, she would die. But the chief took out his sword and pierced them both through, saying that they were both complete fools, that the shamanka remained the same, that her plans were always chaotic and too impulsive, and that she was wrong to decide to rebel against her. The chieftain declared that the shaman, if she were smart, should have killed both him and the man without hesitation. That from birth, the shaman surpassed other lizard men with a high level of intelligence. He said that the other lizards were stupid and unimportant, that there were only the two of them. He said that these stupid lizards do not know how to live and how to act, and that only the two of them were born wise and are capable of reviving the tribe. The shamanka really trusted him then and was glad that the leader believed in her. She followed the chief and became his shaman. Then she met her love, and they had a child. On the orders of the tribal leader, she hypnotized the tribe's warriors and sent them to war. She told the warriors that they had to protect their cave from people. In addition, the shaman helped the chief convince the tribe that sacrifices were necessary. She convinced them that sacrifices were a good thing, and that if they did not do it, the Great Spirit would awaken the volcano. She said that they would not forget every sacrifice. Then a tragedy happened. The shaman's husband died in the war, and the chief ordered their child to be sacrificed to show that he had no favorites in the tribe. The shamanka realized that the chief had fooled her, but there was nothing she could do, and if they hadn't done it the way they did now, the whole tribe would have been in danger. Absolutely everyone, and there would have been no other way out. The shaman took the book from the chief. From the book, she learned that the dragon's heart is a huge source and device that stores energy. If the heart is offered as a sacrifice, it will glow purple. The creature that consumes the bright purple heart of the dragon will be reborn and become a new dragon. The shamanka said that she should have realized earlier that the leader was a mutant who was many times smarter than all the lizard men. After all, she knew much more about magic than others. She should have guessed everything. And now she came to the most important thing, that the Great Spirit would not get angry and would not break into this damn cave. The Great Spirit does not need any sacrifices. These were all the stupid plans of one lizardman who wanted to become a dragon. He then ordered that the shaman be seized and that she put the legacy of the great dragon back in its place. And the guards seized the shaman. She screamed to be let go, and that the chief was deceiving them all, and that the dragon's heart was something else entirely. The chief wanted to satisfy his own needs. The chief told the tribe that the shaman had read a strange book and was talking complete nonsense, and so that she would not cause discord, he ordered her to be thrown into the hot magma. Then the tribe did not listen to her, but sided with the chief. They wanted to kill her and protect their heritage and traditions. The shamanka said sadly that her fellow tribesmen turned out to be very stupid. And then she swore to take revenge on the leader of the tribe. to the one who completely destroyed her life and the life of the tribe. But she alone could not resist the entire tribe, and she had to figure out what to do. She found a whole mountain of desert rose flowers, the lizardmen's cave with her. Their leader Yuna became interested in what the shaman was ready to offer them. She also lured Sia into this operation, hearing that she was looking for a magic pendant. The shaman told Sia that she heard about this pendant, that it drains the voice of the soul. The owner will be able to hear the voice of spirits. Using it on creatures with low intelligence, he will be able to brainwash. She promised Sia this pendant for her assistance. Sia told the shaman, after hearing this story, that following her logic, many lizards would die in this war because they were brainwashed and they were for the leader. But the shaman said that she understood that victims could not be avoided. But as long as the leader was alive, she would not stop. Only after that would a new life be established in the surviving tribe. As a result, the shaman herself became the same. And for the sake of her revenge, she neglected their lives. And now everything has already happened. But at the end, she wanted to atone for her guilt. She came to kill the chief of the tribe. The chief and the shaman were left alone, and he pierced her with his sword at the same time as Lizzie. The chief touched the tattoo on his neck. He was glad that everything seemed to be fine. And since the shaman died during the attack, her magic did not work. But he was worried that the shaman kept doing some strange things until the very end. He thought that this pathetic and useless creature was trying to kill him. He heard Lizzie's voice saying that she had tried to protect him, but he had stabbed her in the back, and that he was a traitor. He was amazed that this woman was lucky to survive. Lizzie drank a reviving potion from her supplies. He decided to hit her again, so that this annoying woman would finally die. The chief told her that Lizzie was confused, and that she was not protecting him, but using him, and wanted to continue using him in the future. He chuckled and said that he was like that himself and used everyone and everything. He is ready for anything. He considered everyone on his path to be just steps. Steps for his great goal, to stand at the top of all living things. He told Lizzie that she could consider her death at his hands a great honor, that she had taken part in the birth of a great creature, a new dragon. Lizzie found it infuriating that he spoke with such pleasure of his misdeeds. Lizzie thought the chief was talking as if he had already defeated everyone. But the Arpedia players had a cheat move called calling a friend. She decided to call Zeke and challenge him to come up with something. But the game plan showed that she had 0 friends. She remembered that she forgot to add him as a friend, and Lizzie knew she was lost. The chief raised his weapon at her. Meanwhile, Zeke managed to break through to where the leader was hiding, and they stood shoulder to shoulder with Sia and the leader of the warriors, whom Sia still managed to convince of her rightness. He shouted that they had come to save Lizzie, even though she was just a pathetic swindler. But all I saw was a pile of things on the sand that had once belonged to her. And the system reported that Lizzie had died. But the leader's things were also lying on the sand, and it was absolutely impossible to understand what had happened here. But then first a hand rose from the sand, and then the leader himself. The leader said that he had been waiting for him for a long time, but did not expect him to jump out from somewhere above. The chief acted as if nothing had happened, and asked the senior warrior what was going on in the war and what successes there were, as if they had parted an hour ago. The voivode said that they had successfully dealt with everyone and reclaimed their cave. The chieftain said that this was simply excellent, and that it was time to quickly return to their homeland before it began. Because if they don't manage to make the sacrifice before the end of the day, there will be a big explosion. The senior warrior ordered him to stand where he was standing and for the leader not to make any sudden movements. The commander told the chief that the day had actually already passed and nothing had happened. The spirit did not get angry and did not blow up the cave, which the leader had been frightening them with all his life. But the main thing is that they now know that there was no need for sacrifices at all, and that their relatives died in vain for centuries so that he could keep the tribe in check. They told him that now the whole tribe, or rather what was left of the tribe, knew about it and told him to surrender. The leader grabbed his face and began to laugh loudly. They looked at the old man in bewilderment and decided that he had gone crazy. The chief said that he was glad that now he could stop pretending. The leader turned to the governor with a demand to kill these people and follow him. But instead, the warrior brought the full force of his axe down on the chieftain. But he did not receive the slightest damage and shouted to the warrior what he would get from him for disobedience, because he gave the order to attack the people, not his leader. The chieftain repeated his order once more. In his hand, a pendant sparkled with a ruby stone. The warrior began to chop the chieftain with an axe again. But the leader was alive, although he understood that he could no longer influence the minds of his subordinates with the help of the pendant. The chieftain thought that the pendant had broken or had lost its power for some reason. But the chieftain realized that it was all because of the mark on the neck, and that this magic was blocking the brainwashing. Zeke said that, so be it. They are ready to listen to the chief before death, and that he doesn't believe that the former leader has absolutely nothing to tell them. But instead of words, the leader scooped up a handful of sand in his palm and threw it at Zeke, and he himself started running. The leader ran towards the fiery mountain, towards the main crater of the dormant volcano. He wore a dragon scale cloak that had a fire resistance level of 3. On his feet were dragon scale boots that had a fire resistance level of 5. The boots could even walk on the surface of lava. He was in a hurry to return the dragon's heart. Although the heart will not glow purple, it has been absorbing life energy for a long time. He thought that even if it was not perfect, when the leader ate it, he would gain incredible power and deal with everyone at once and forever. The leader managed to find and extract the dragon's heart from the lava. He swore to himself that he would not just kill them, but subject them to inhuman torture. But something was wrong with the heart. It had disappeared somewhere, and he had personally placed it in this fireproof case. He couldn't believe that what he had dedicated his whole life to had disappeared somewhere. He heard the mocking voice of the damned blacksmith, who asked if this was what he was looking for up to his ears in lava. In his hand was it, the heart of a dragon. Zeke said he came here a little earlier and got it to serve him well. To do this, Zeke used Galley's gift, a magic glove. The glove could be separated from the base by shooting a steel wire with special heat resistance. Zeke was glad he remembered to grab it. The chief roared that the man did not dare to take away the lizard's treasure and demanded that they give him the dragon's heart. He rushed at Zeke, saying that his heart was his, and Zeke asked what evidence the chief had for this. The chief replied that the light purple color was proof of that the dragon's heart only turned purple when life force was poured into it. And even if the heart is not perfectly colored purple, he achieved this after 100 years of sacrifices that fed the power of the heart. And this is proof that he is the owner of this relic. Blacksmith Zeke stood and couldn't believe his eyes. This crazy old man filled the heart of a dead dragon with life force at the expense of the lives of his subjects and captured people. He asked the chief again if this was so. The chief confirmed it and again demanded that his treasure be returned to him. Zeke told the chief to accept this as punishment for his crimes. The chief did not understand what the man was talking about. His words, which he spoke to Zeke, were heard by his fellow tribesmen. And only then did the veil of centuries-old deception fall. They realized that the leader had deceived them for his own benefit. The leader, clutching the magic crystal in his hands, ordered his subjects to stop, and that the humans had deceived them, and they had misunderstood everything. He stood before them and insisted that he could explain everything to them and that the dragon had deceived him, asking them to bring him posthumous sacrifices so that the mountain would not explode. He asked his subjects to believe him, and that this was the man's plan for them to kill each other. The senior warrior snatched the pendant from him and told the lizards that the chief was no longer their boss, and it was time to end it. The slaughter had dragged on too long. Zeke stood behind the crowd of lizards and could not see what was happening there. But suddenly, the heart in his hand seemed to come to life and glowed with a brighter purple light. The color became a deep, saturated purple. Sia was already running towards him with all her might, shouting that everything was all right. Zeke replied that it was a piece of cake, and that he was fine, and his heart was in it. Suddenly he felt unwell, and the system reported that his stamina was reduced due to sulfur dioxide poisoning. Zeke told Sia that his life would end when the leaf fell, and that if he died, she was to deliver the heart to the dwarf galley in Nosark. He didn't want to die here, and so stupidly. The voivode held a bunch of grass in his hands and tugged at Zeke to bring him to his senses. He told him to eat the volcanic grass immediately, and he would feel better. Volcanic grass is a special grass that grows around volcanoes and is an antidote to poisoning. And the governor forcibly opened his mouth and put grass in there and said that soon he would be as fit as a cucumber. Zeke vomited violently, but regained consciousness. The system reported that the poisoning was cured and his health was normal. The voivode handed Sia a magical pendant made of red ruby, which was the goal of her quest. Sia was simply jubilant and glowing with happiness. She had completed her quest. The lizard told Zeke that Sia is a good partner. Several lizards were approaching them. They had something in their hands. They said they made it for Zeke as a gift. He couldn't figure out what it was. The lizards said it was a weapon. They watched him make a weapon for them and decided to try it too. Zeke joked that he thought it was a lump of coal. They were embarrassed by their ineptitude. Then Zeke handed them his parting gift. He gave them Galley's blacksmithing book. He asked if they could even read, and he thought that he had become somewhat attached to these animals. He told them to study and practice a lot, and then they would be able to make not only weapons for themselves, but anything they wanted. They thanked their friend with delight. Well, it's time to say goodbye. Together they experienced many revolutionary events in just a couple of days. The warrior chief sat over the grave of the former chief and thought until one of the lizards called out to him. He said that everything was ready and they could leave. He said that he was already on his way. The lizards were leaving their native nest. They decided to start a new chronicle of their tribe far from the places with which so many difficult memories are associated. Well, the blacksmith Zeke and Sia were preparing their hot air balloon to leave the adventure places. They both completed their quests and were ready to return. Zeke joked that they somehow missed Lizzie, and it became boring after her death. And suddenly, they heard a familiar cry for them to wait for her. They almost fainted, thinking that they were both hallucinating. This couldn't be happening. But Lizzie was approaching them with her cart loaded with something. Enjoying her dramatic entrance and their expressions, she said that she was just out looking for a desert rose, and that she found it near the spawn point. Lizzie bragged that it was a jackpot, and she was now rich. Zeke and Sia realized that they needed to run as fast as possible, and they quickly began to gain altitude on their balloon. Lizzie realized that they were going to screw her over again. But that wasn't why she had risen from the dead. Zeke said that they had no room for her in the basket, and that she had to find her way home on her own. Sia told her to drop her treasures and grab her hand. That was her way of showing female solidarity. But Lizzie wouldn't be herself if she didn't bring her bag of treasures with her. Lizzie inside the basket got so mad at Zeke that he wanted to leave her, but she said she would never forgive him. Sia asked him to apologize to the girl. It was as if they had conspired among themselves, as if they were girlfriends. And Zeke thought that it was impossible to get involved with women at all. And how would he survive the road home now? Zeke grabbed his head at this sudden female coalition against him. From their basket, they saw an army of lizards. They raised their spears in greeting, paying tribute to the people who had given their tribe new life and new knowledge. The lizards screamed his name over and over again, and he even burst into tears. Zeke waved goodbye to them and thought that maybe they would meet again, and that everything would be fine between them now. And here they were again, standing at the gates of Nosarka. Zeke told his friends that this was where their paths would diverge. Sia suggested meeting after they had prepared for Makinia's quest, and so they parted ways. He told both of them that we would meet somewhere else, but in reality he was pretty tired of both of them. Not that he was a misogynist, but rather a deep introvert. Lizzie thought that he wouldn't even dream of getting rid of her. As soon as she sold her desert roses, she would immediately find him and fall on his tail. Lizzie and Zeke began bickering again, each one pushing their own merits, and Sia looked at them in bewilderment, because she had never seen Zeke so impolite before. She said jokingly that they were very friendly. They both objected that, no way. Zeke walked through Nosark and held in his hands the dragon's heart, obtained with such difficulty. He was already thinking, maybe he should just forget about Galley and all the gnomes and sell this treasure, but he stopped himself, thinking that communicating with Lizzie was having a bad effect. But the thought of how much money he could get for it did not leave his head. Still, he decided to complete the quest, and, most importantly, to get the secret knowledge of the gnomes. How he wanted it. The elf was watching him. He chuckled as he heard the blacksmith Zeke thinking out loud. He thought that in his case it might be possible. He decided to treat the blacksmith with respect. The elf was watched by children who decided that the old man was crazy because he was talking to himself. There was a tent pitched near the half-destroyed dragon, and Zeke and Galley were standing there. Galley was glad that Zeke had not only returned alive, but had also gotten the dragon's heart, something he hadn't really hoped for. Zeke told him to stop giving him nearly impossible quests. Galley handed him a scroll and said it contained their secret technique. Zeke was happy. He had been waiting for this for so long. But the scroll smelled strange. He unrolled the scroll to see what was inside. There was some nonsense from Galley. Like, Galley is looking for a country suitable for emigration. Because he chose the wrong student, he was falsely accused of terrorism and is now under investigation. He asked for those willing to accept him and promised to raise the blacksmithing in the host country to a new level. Zeke screamed that he would strangle him now. Galley apologized for giving the wrong scroll. But Zeke didn't calm down and interrogated this lousy gnome, what was wrong with him and why he wanted to give him up. The gnome justified himself, something like that, just in case. Zeke said that there were enough excuses, and he had already figured out his vile dwarven nature. Zeke unrolled a new scroll and delved into reading it. It was about overheated coals. Superheated coals are created by combining bitumen and artisan dust. They produce higher quality iron by removing impurities at temperatures above 200 degrees Celsius. Galley said that for this reason, human weapons are not comparable to dwarven weapons. It's all about the quality of the iron. It's lighter than regular iron and lasts 10 times longer. Such iron requires superheated coal. The production of such coal has been a secret of the gnomes for hundreds of years. Galley said that the dwarves would never part with their secret for anything in the world. But times have changed, and external threats dictate new ways out. It was time to renounce centuries-old traditions and tell the world about their technology. He asked Zeke to share the secrets of the gnome technology with other people. The dwarven iron production technology was simply incredible. Zeke hurried to study his ranks and clearances in his account to get down to business immediately. Most of his blacksmithing skills at that time were at rank 4, and if he used them to make dwarven iron, he would blow any blacksmith to smithereens. Except for the rankers, of course, and if he can compete in price, he can even beat the dwarves. He then thought that there was a high demand for repairing rare items in Nosarka, and a new plan began to form in his head. And with this plan, he hoped to find the legendary Bartz's weapon. He never forgot why he came to the game with the blacksmith profession. Suddenly, someone called Zeke by name. Zeke thought that he was the only one missing now when he had such new grandiose plans. Dylan said that he was tired of looking for him in all the cities and villages and that he brought him the iron ore that Zeke ordered from him. Dylan said that he had not been able to contact him for a long time, so he arranged for delivery directly to Nosark. But he asked not to ignore his messages, because he thought Zeke was out of the game. Zeke told Dylan not to be mad because he wasn't picking his nose. He was busy with very important things. Dylan said that you have to keep your promises. Zeke said that he wasn't going to disappear anywhere anytime soon. The blacksmith was going to set up a forge in Nosarka while he was preparing for Makinia's quest. Dylan thought that the blacksmith was a little crazy, and he noticed that birds were flying past them, screaming, as if they were escaping from something. He told the blacksmith that the idea was crazy, because in the land of the gnomes, even a person with a high rank of blacksmithing skill has nothing to catch, and that half of the ore was bought on credit. Zeke told Dylan not to worry, and that he, Zeke, was determined to be a total success, and that everything will be just awesome. Well, unless God interferes with his plan. Dylan heard a loud sound, raised his head, and trembled in horror. A huge monster in the form of a dragon descended from the sky. Zeke only had time to think that the gnome galley had some serious speed, and decided that it would be better to run and then figure it out. Dylan ran, and thought that if he told them that he had been crushed by a dragon in the same place for the second time, no one would believe in such a coincidence. And at that very moment an iron foot fell on him. Dylan died with the thought that the game really was stupid. Zeke was horrified because Gally had assured him that this time everything would work out right. He thought that this damn Gally was a fucking fraud. Everyone ran away in horror. The dragon's face looked at Zeke with its demonically burning eyes. Zeke thought that now he was definitely screwed. Player Seong-Soo. Don walked and thought that it wasn't a game, but complete crap. Boring, uninteresting, and the content was weak. He looked exotic in a pink women's dress and with a toy hammer. He was so eager for something interesting and exciting when the blacksmith Zeke rushed past him screaming. He screamed, "How shameful!" He lifted his skirt. And then he died at the dragon's claws. A group of armed men appeared. They shouted that this was their chance, given by God himself. Players were very excited because if it was a real dragon, they would get a lot of loot from it. Clouds of smoke appeared near the dragon. Zeke thought that was it. The dragon was dead, but it was not to be. The dragon opened its mouth and moved towards Zeke. Zeke started running again. He just couldn't figure out what was making the dragon chase him. Zeke ran to the city wall and realized that he was at a dead end. He realized that he was now a complete failure. He could break down the wall and try to escape, but even with a level 4 mining skill, he couldn't cope with the dwarves' creation. And then it dawned on Zeke why he was running away from the little dragon. It was better for him to be afraid of him. And the blacksmith called upon the power of the former dragon slayer. He began to hit the dragon with his pickaxe, but only minor damage was done. Zeke thought that Gally had made a really tough dragon, and maybe breaking the wall was the better decision. But then the dragon, for some reason, kicked on its back and raised its paws up. The iron monster was crying like a child. Zeke didn't understand what the hell was going on. He hadn't done any real damage to the dragon. It was something else. He hadn't even noticed that there was someone standing behind him. The one standing next to him realized that he couldn't control himself. The person standing nearby realized that the newborn was given too much strength and a powerful body, and not understanding such a simple truth, his own parent punishes him. This is very sad. Zeke felt that someone was standing behind him and turned around, and asked the stranger what he was doing here and that he needed to save himself. But the stranger suddenly seemed to evaporate. He stood majestically on top of the wall, and an unbearably bright blue light emanated from him. He addressed the crying dragon so that he would not cry, and that he would calm him down. It was none other than the ancient dragon Andorras, ruler of the northeastern Nosarka Mountains. Game level 200. Zeke had seen a lot in this game, but it was truly impossible to even imagine that he would see Andorras himself in person. In the office of the Arpedia developer, the entire management was gathered around the table. The game went wrong and off script. The story should have gone completely differently. Initially, Andorras was supposed to go berserk at the sight of the mechanical dragon and completely destroy Nosark, but no one expected such a turn of events. The CEO guessed it was because of the mechanical dragon's purple heart. Because the player brought a purple heart instead of a regular one, a real dragon was born. Only a baby. That's why it behaves like a baby. Andorras took pity on the baby. The director roared. In other words, another valuable event went down the drain. And again because of this boy. The CEO did not share his anger and thought it was great that things were not going according to plan. He was very interested in how the history of Arpedia would now unfold. Meanwhile, Andorras jumped off the wall and walked towards Zeke. The blacksmith seemed paralyzed by the grandeur of what was happening. Andorras held a teddy bear in his hands and ordered Zeke to take charge. Zeke stammered that he didn't understand what kind of responsibility Andorras wanted to place on him. He ordered him to take responsibility for his child,